Chapter 263. Qin Yining naturally felt honored that Pang Xiao was being praised like this. However, apart from being happy, she was more worried about him. In the past, I had guessed that Pang Zhishi's life might not be good on the surface. Qin Yining stood up and paced back and forth worriedly. He was the vanguard of the attack on BG. In order to take revenge, he cruelly killed some BG officials. I originally thought that the BG officials who surrendered to Da Ju must be on the opposite side of Pang Zhishi. In addition, he has high prestige in the army, so the Ju emperor must be wary of him. However, the consequences of these two factors are unimaginable. If what you said is true, the Ju emperor will definitely not allow him to exist in this world. Qin Yining frowned and slowly stopped walking. She gripped the armrest of her chair so tightly that her knuckles gradually turned white. After hearing her analysis, Mu Jinghu also felt that Pang Xiao's situation was indeed dangerous. He was so shocked that his face turned pale. Based on what you said, won't he be in danger when he goes back this time? Qin Yining shook her head and said, I'm afraid that these people's attacks on him are just adding fuel to the fire. The Ju emperor won't touch him for the time being. After all, they still need him to take down Dian. The Tiger Army is now the main force of the army. It's a big taboo to change the commander-in-chief at the last minute. He'll be fine in the short term. Mu Jinghu heard this and sighed deeply. Fortunately, that's the case. On second thought, he only said this to let Qin Yining know that Pang Xiao was in a difficult position outside. He didn't expect her to know more than he did. He was also involved. Mu Jinghu scratched his head and said, since you know everything, that's good. I'll take my leave first. I still have to thank you. Mu Jinghu felt strange and asked, thank me for what? Thank you for your concern for Pang Zhishi. It's Pang Zhishi's blessing to have a close friend like you. Mu Jinghu blushed at her compliment. He did not know how to respond to such a straightforward compliment, so he coughed and said, nothing, I'll take my leave first. Qin Yining responded with a smile to a person who was not good with words but was extremely honest. He politely walked out the door to see him off. Qin Yining frowned as he watched him walk away. He turned around and went up to the attic. Last night, he was by her side. Although they were separated by a small table, the two of them slept on the same bed. They could hear each other's breathing. Even when she was asleep, she could feel his strong presence. But they had only been together for such a short time, and he had to go back. Moreover, he had to face the accusations of colluding with the enemy. Even if she could analyze that Emperor Ju would not touch him for the time being, she still felt bad for him. Qin Yining's mind was full of worry. That night, he could not sleep again. He only managed to fall asleep when the sky gradually brightened. However, after sleeping for an hour, he got up and fainted again. Not to mention the Sun Clan, even the Dowager Duchess, who was old and dim-sighted, could see that Qin Yining was haggard. She was worried that her old illness would relapse, so she hurried her to rest. While Qin Yining was catching up on sleep, Pang Xiao and Huzi had already returned to Shihua City. Pang Xiao raised his eyebrows in front of him when he saw Zhao Yushui, who looked like a white steamed bun. He said, Eunuch Zhao's greeting gift is really special. You immediately put a big accusation on my head. Colluding with the enemy? Betraying the country? Eunuch Zhao, is this the crime that you have decided on this king? Zhao Yushui was specially sent by Emperor Ju to supervise the army. He was in charge of observing Pang Xiao's movements at the front line. He had the authority to directly report to Emperor Ju about the situation at the front line. Emperor Ju valued Zhao Yushui. In addition, he and Eunuch Li Guanwen, who was in charge of the ceremony directorate, were from the same hometown and were also father and son. Before he left, Zhao Yueshui's godfather, Eunuch Li, had privately warned him a lot. He also heard some rumors, so he had some contempt for Pang Xiao in his heart. Moreover, no matter what he did, his godfather would protect him in the capital. Who would dare to be disrespectful to the army supervisor? Zhao Yushui smiled proudly. Wang Yi really knows how to joke. How can we have the authority to convict Wang Yi? However, as the commander-in-chief, Wang Yi left his post without permission. By doing this, are you worthy of the emperor's trust in you? Are you worthy of the emperor's great kindness? As he spoke, he cupped his hands towards the north and arrogantly raised his chin to stare at Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao playfully took a pillow and leaned it against his back. He sat comfortably on the round-backed chair, his straight legs in black silk pants on the table. He leisurely said, "The enemy's new commander-in-chief avoids fighting for 30 days in a month. This king is bored to death. Can't he go and explore the terrain? If the enemy doesn't fight, Wang Yi will think of ways to make them fight. Have you thought about how much food the Tiger Army spends in a day while you're wandering around like this? The emperor trusts you and gives you money and food. Is this how you repay him?" Zhao Yueshui's voice was very tough. His black eyes were like small black beans embedded in white steamed buns. "I have to report Wang Yi's actions to the emperor." "TSK, TSK. Pang Xiao played with the horsewhip in his hand. "How interesting. Zhao Yushui, have you forgotten where you are?" Pang Xiao's voice was very languid. His tone was amiable as if he was talking about the weather. But Zhao Yushui felt his body tighten. He put on a strong front and said, "Wang Yi, don't forget whose territory this world is. How dare you?" Huzi had long disliked this fat steamed bun. He kicked Zhao Yushui several steps back and fell to the ground. "How dare you be presumptuous in front of our Wang Yi? Pang Zhishi, you're the one who's bold. You actually dare to beat me." "Beat?" Pang Xiao chuckled. He lazily supported his forehead with one hand and narrowed his eyes slightly. "List out eunuch Zhao's crimes of selling information at a high price, embezzling military provisions, and colluding with the local gentry. He colluded with the enemy and committed treason. This king's bodyguard caught him in the act and still dared to lie through his teeth. Report all of this to the emperor. As the commander-in-chief of the army, this king can't tolerate such a disaster by his side, so he beheaded him on the spot. Then draft a memorial for this king to apologize to the emperor. However, this is an urgent matter. We can't tolerate the existence of a spy in front of the army." At this point, Pang Xiao closed his eyes and pretended to sleep. Huzi responded with a yes. His eyes lit up as he grabbed Zhao Yushui by the collar and walked out. Zhao Yushui was so scared that his face turned pale. He wet his pants on the spot. "You can't do this. You're slandering me." "Slandering you? Not only did you sell military information at a high price, but you also dare to put the blame on Wang Yi. I think you're clearly benefiting from an outsider. You want to get rid of Wang Yi and make the emperor lose a loyal official." Huzi had been by Pang Xiao's side for a long time and was very eloquent. He threw Zhao Yushui to the open space in the barracks and made his evil deeds public. The soldiers of the Tiger Army had long been displeased with a eunuch ordering them around in the barracks. Moreover, Zhao Yushui was also very annoying. Now that they heard Huzi say that he dared to slander Pang Xiao, as a direct descendant of Pang Xiao, everyone who heard the news was furious and fought to tear Zhao Yushui into pieces. For a time, the barracks were filled with discussions about Zhao Yueshui's treason. They clamored to kill Zhao Yushui. In just a moment, the situation had become tense. If Zhao Yushui wasn't killed, it might cause a mutiny. Chapter 264. Just as the Tiger Army outside was clamoring to tear Zhao Yushui into pieces, Huzi quickly walked into the tent. He leaned close to Pang Xiao and asked in a low voice, "Wang Yi, it's so chaotic outside. I'm afraid that the situation won't be easy to clean up. Do you really plan to kill Zhao Yushui?" Pang Xiao looked up and said, "Of course it's true. He acted like a tyrant in Shihua City and aroused public anger. This king wants to kill him to pacify the army. What's more, he sold the information without any evidence. This king didn't accuse him wrongly. But Zhao Yushui is your majesty's spy. If Wang Yi kills him, it's a public confrontation against your majesty. I'm afraid that it will cause the villain to speak ill of you behind your back and make your majesty more afraid of you." Pang Xiao sneered and said, "Do you think that this castration was entirely his idea? He usually acts like a tyrant in Shihua City. Although he straightens his back, doesn't this king have to put away his arrogance? Even if he looks down on this king in his heart, he's used to disobeying him in public but disobeying him in private. Now he dares to criticize this king to his face. Where do you think he gets the courage? Hearing this, Hu's expression changed and he sucked in a breath of cold air. Your Highness, are you saying that this is the Emperor's order? Pang Xiao shook his head. Your Majesty is a smart person. This king is still useful. He won't shoot himself in the foot. Li Guanwen must have noticed something and communicated with Zhao Yushui. That's still difficult. Hu's face turned pale. Your Majesty has been afraid of Wang Yi for a long time. The braver Wang Yi is in battle and the greater his contributions, the more your Majesty is afraid of him. Li Guanwen is your Majesty's eunuch. Since he can hold the position of eunuch in the ceremony directorate, it means that he must be smart and shrewd. How can such a guy misjudge your Majesty's intention towards Pang Xiao? Although he knew that your Majesty was such a person, Huzi was still shocked and broke out in a cold sweat. At this moment, the curtain was lifted and Zheng Pei in a dark blue robe walked in quickly. He said anxiously, Wang Yi. Mr. Zheng is here. Have a seat. Pang Xiao raised his chin at Zheng Pei. Huzi brought a chair over and placed it properly. He cupped his hands at Zheng Pei. His polite and distant attitude was completely different from his previous intimate attitude. Zheng Pei felt bitter in his heart. He bowed to Pang Xiao first and said anxiously before sitting down, Wang Yi, please think twice. Zhao Yushui is Li Guanwen's adopted son. If you kill Zhao Yushui, you will offend Li Guanwen. Li Guanwen has the most say in your Majesty. He is not sweet when making candy, but sour when making vinegar. You can't be reckless. If you kill Zhao Yushui, you will offend the Heavenly Majesty. Your Majesty has all the power and can't tolerate such things like killing first and reporting later. Zhao Yushui is someone your Majesty sent to you. Even if you want to beat a dog, you have to look at its owner. For the sake of your standing in the imperial court in the future, Wang Yi, please think carefully about what I said. At this point, Zheng Pei stood up and bowed again. Pang Xiao smiled calmly and looked very gentle under the candlelight. Mr. Zheng, please sit down and talk. He didn't answer Zheng Pei directly. Zheng Pei's heart was full of bitterness. He knew that his behavior of secretly reporting Pang Xiao's every move to your Majesty finally pushed this young man away from him completely. He didn't trust him anymore. But he couldn't completely ignore him. After all, he was also the descendant of Pang Zhongzheng. Zheng Pei slowly sat back on the chair and looked at Pang Xiao expectantly. Mr. Zheng, what you said is reasonable. Pang Xiao said leisurely. His tone didn't seem to be talking about an important matter that would affect his future or even life and death. It was light and casual as if he were chatting. With Mr. Zheng's intelligence, you should understand that even if this king doesn't kill Zhao Yushui, some things are already settled. Some people who don't like this king will still dislike him. Zheng Pei was suffocated and couldn't think of a suitable answer for a long time. He knew that Pang Xiao was a smart person and couldn't be fooled with one or two nice words. Pang Xiao was telling the truth. Your Majesty's fear of Pang Xiao wouldn't decrease at all because of this, and the old officials of Biji who surrendered wouldn't change their opinion of Pang Xiao because of this. This king knows that Mr. Zheng is thinking for this king, but now I believe that Mr. Zheng has already thought through some key points. Since some things can't be changed, why should this king be a pushover? Don't tell me that as a man, you don't even have the courage to speak loudly. That will only make you more vulnerable. Sooner or later, you will be bullied until you can't raise your head. Zheng Pei was convinced and couldn't find any words to refute. He could only nod. Pang Xiao glanced at Huzi. Huzi didn't worry as much as Zheng Pei. Seeing that Pang Xiao had made a decision, he rubbed his fists and was eager to try. After getting Pang Xiao's approval, he immediately rushed out to deal with Zhao Yushui in high spirits. Only Pang Xiao and Zheng Pei were left in the tent. Zheng Pei looked at Pang Xiao's sharp eyes under the light. For a moment, he felt that he couldn't look straight at them and was extremely embarrassed. He used to think that he was the most trustworthy person around Pang Xiao. He also used to think that it was his betrayal that pushed away the person who used to trust him the most. But now it seemed that Pang Xiao had never really trusted him at all. He had memorized every detail of how he used Pang Xiao, but he had always pretended to be ignorant of it. He was like a patient wolf that had been staring at its prey and chasing after it. When the time was right, he would show his fangs. Now he couldn't touch Pang Xiao at all. He couldn't balance him, let alone control him. It was impossible for him to become Pang Xiao's trusted aide. Perhaps, this trusted aide had always been self-proclaimed. Zheng Pei sighed and left. Pang Xiao looked at Zheng Pei's back. After a while, he withdrew his gaze and closed his eyes to rest. Sure enough, Huzi managed to get some useful information from Zhao Yushui. Zhao Yushui was a soft bag who appeared to be tough on the outside but was actually timid on the inside. After being interrogated, Zhao Yushui wished that he could die quickly. Huzi then fulfilled his wish and went to reply to Pang Xiao. Wang Yi, that eunuch confessed everything. Yes. Wang Yi guessed correctly. Li Guanwen did mention to Zhao Yushui in private that when your majesty invited your mother, grandfather, and grandmother into the palace for a short stay, he ordered the empress to pay attention to what they said. He wanted to know some of your thoughts. That's to be expected. It's not easy to get my mother to talk. The emperor will make his next move. Pang Xiao played with the horsewhip in his hand and said, since that's the case, the battle here should end quickly. I'm worried that something will happen to my mother and the others. Huzi heard this and nodded heavily in agreement. Pang Xiao focused on thinking about tactics for 2 days. It wasn't that he didn't have the ability to win. It was just that the siege was weak, and the supply line was long. Daeju was far away, and after taking over the mess in Biji, the treasury was very empty. The emperor was very strict with him and didn't give him silver rice. The supplies were not timely, and the Duke of Dinghua avoided the battle in Dian and closed the city gates. He couldn't feed his soldiers, so how could he stop them from stealing food? It was the same for the soldiers of Yang dynasty who were guarding outside Great Yang City. If they couldn't eat, they could only steal. In the long run, the people would be the ones to suffer. Pang Xiao only wanted to end the battle as soon as possible. Chapter 265. Dian Liu Yingsha, the prefect of Baochang, sent 30,000 mercenaries to request Emperor Yuan Kang to move the capital to Baochang to build a new capital. Emperor Yuan Kang refused and dismissed the petition. Liu Yingsha rebelled and appointed his relative Yuqi Shujie as the emperor of Dian. He changed the name of the dynasty to Kaiyuan, and Liu Yingsha was named as the regent. All the southern provinces and counties responded to the Kaiyuan emperor. Dian lost most of its land, and later Yang controlled the waterways. Liu Yingsha's grain was stolen. Huzi finished reading the secret report in a low voice. He clicked his tongue and said, "This Liu Yingsha is too daring." He failed to request to move the capital, so he elected an emperor. He even stole the grain that Jingju collected and took care of the waterways. Won't Jingju and the surrounding cities be starved of grain? Pang Xiao nodded thoughtfully. This is a chaotic world. So, such people are bound to exist. This Liu Yingsha is quite a scheming person. His actions are extremely disadvantageous for us. Why? Huzi asked curiously. The later Yang cut off the Dian's grain. Isn't it the perfect time for us to attack the city? That's right. However, my initial focus was on the entire Dian. After Liu Yingsha's actions, the Dian was split in half. In the past, as long as we took Jingju, the Dian would be ours. Now that we've taken Jingju, there's still a later Yang. Pang Xiao stood up and paced around. Our national treasury is also hard to support. If we only took Jingju and controlled the Yuqi Yang, we could still grit our teeth and hold on. But now, even if we take down the capital, we can only capture the ones in the capital. Only the former Yang dynasty will be destroyed. I'm afraid this is not good. Huzi thought about it and understood. This Liu guy really knows how to pick a time. We can't care that much. Let's take Jingju first. Even if the later Yang dynasty has the word Yang, the Dian will still fall at the hands of Daeju. Exactly. Now that the capital has become an isolated island without food, it won't last much longer. Huzi was in high spirits. We have to hurry. Pang Xiao walked to the map and carefully studied the countermeasures. He had to end this war as soon as possible, because Qin Yining was in the middle of the capital, which was about to run out of food. He didn't want her to starve and suffer. At this moment, Jingdo City was in chaos. The court had just auctioned off a large number of idle jobs to improve the status of the merchants. During this period of time, provisions had been continuously transported into the capital. The common people had not been happy for more than a few days before news came that the provisions on the road had been robbed and that the later Yang had established a dynasty in Baochang. The citizens of Jingju fell into an incomparable panic. The capital of the Dian dynasty was the capital, and the emperor was Emperor Yuan Kang. What was that later Yang? This was nothing more than a farce by the traitors. It was just an excuse to steal food from the people of the capital and the garrison. The panicked people filled the Yamen and Xuanzu temple's gates, wanting to find someone to give them an explanation. However, this time, both the Yamen and Xuanzu temple's gates were tightly shut. The people went to the grain stores to buy food, but all of the grain stores were closed and hung signs saying they were closed. Even the granaries of Jingdo were surrounded by layers of guards. The people excitedly charged through the streets and returned home in disappointment. After a few days, some people began to take their families and leave Jingdo. However, after 3 days, the outer city gates were heavily guarded. Everyone who entered or left the city had to go through strict checks. If anyone wanted to leave Jingdo with their families, they were ordered to be sent back. Someone had a conflict with the garrison and shouted, "Jingdo is about to be taken. We commoners have nothing to eat or drink. Are we waiting to die here? We want to go to the south and join the later Yang." Before this person could finish shouting, he was dragged away by the garrison. His pants were pulled down and he was beaten 40 times. He was beaten until he was gasping for air. His wife and children cried as they carried him back into the city. This kind of situation happened at every gate in the outer city. While the people were panicking, they were also dissatisfied with the imperial court. They couldn't protect them and didn't allow them to escape. No wonder some people said that the Dian dynasty deserved to be destroyed. At this time, Yu Qiyang was in a terrible fix. He rushed into retired emperor's bedchamber in large strides and said to his face, "Father Emperor, Yu Qishujie has declared himself the emperor and turned the south of Baochang to the coast into his territory. He has established a later Yang dynasty. Father, if you still refuse to tell us the whereabouts of the silver, our Dian will really be destroyed." The Emperor Emeritus lay on his side on the bed and leisurely smoked a water pipe. He inhaled and exhaled clouds and smoke with his eyes closed. "You are the Emperor of Dian. Whether the country is destroyed or not, it's up to you. What does it have to do with me?" Yu Qiyang looked at the Emperor Emeritus in disbelief. "Father, don't you have any feelings for this country? After all, you were once the master of Great Yang. What's the use of you being greedy for such a large sum of silver? Do you still expect to go out and establish a dynasty? How much silver can a person use in a lifetime? Do you still want to enjoy it for yourself? Can you be at ease with your conscience? Taking out this large sum of money to preserve Dian is the right thing to do. TSK. Even if the country is destroyed, I won't be the emperor. Why should I be anxious? Don't bother me again. Get out." The Emperor Emeritus took another puff of his water pipe and waved his hand at Yu Qiyang as if he was shooing away a fly. Yu Qiyang was so angry that his brain buzzed and his vision turned black. If it weren't for Eunuch Lu's quick reflexes, Yu Qiyang would have fallen to the ground in anger. This was his imperial father. This was the real reason why his father abdicated the throne for him. It wasn't because of his talent, but because there was no other candidate. It wasn't because his father really wanted to abdicate the throne, but because his father didn't want to be the emperor of a destroyed country. He wanted him to take the blame. He couldn't beat or scold him. He couldn't argue or persuade him. Yu Qiyang walked down the street in a daze and looked at the blue sky. His eyes were full of desolation and despair. Could it be that the heavens wanted the Dian to be destroyed? "Say, should I agree to move the capital?" Yu Qiyang asked Eunuch Lu beside him. Eunuch Lu hurriedly said, "Your Majesty, if you agree to move the capital, you might be ambushed once you reach Baochang. That Liu Yingxia doesn't have good intentions. Maybe he doesn't want you to move the capital, but wants to trick you. He wants to be the master of Dian." Yu Qiyang smiled bitterly and said, "How could I not know? That's why I refused at the beginning. But if I agree, maybe the Dian will be fine. Maybe I won't have to be the emperor of a destroyed country. The history books won't record me in such an unbearable manner. Eunuch Lu lowered his head. These words weren't something that an eunuch like him could say. At this moment, a guard rushed in and reported, "Your Majesty, the Tiger Army has launched a general attack." Although Duke Angua has closed the city gates and refused to meet them, the Tiger Army is coming fiercely and has surrounded the capital from all sides. When Yu Qiyang heard this, his face turned pale. He looked up to the sky and roared, "The heavens want me to die, the heavens want me to die." While Qin Huayuan was helping Duke Angua, Li Mian, defend the city, Qin Yining gathered everyone in the family Qin in Ci Xiao Garden and announced his decision. Chapter 266. Qin Yining said in a low voice with a grave expression, "Right now, the situation outside is very tense. Just now, Master Zhong sent someone to tell me that the capital has already been surrounded by Daju's soldiers. Previously, our soldiers were guarding the outer city gates and didn't allow the commoners to go out. Now, our people are scared back into the city and are guarding the city gates tightly. Even if we want to let the commoners out, we can't." When the entire family heard this, they were so nervous that their faces turned pale. They suddenly felt like dark clouds were pressing down on the city, and a building was about to collapse. "What should we do? Isn't this country going to be destroyed?" The old madam was so scared that tears welled up in her eyes. Mammy Qin hurriedly handed over a handkerchief to wipe the old madam's tears. Second madam said, "Sister Yi, if that's really the case, we should guard the courtyard to the death. If we want to move, where will we move to?" Qin Yining said, "Second aunt, what we should do now is not to guard the courtyard to the death, but to leave this place. Think about it, now that the city gates have been sealed, the provisions in the city will probably be supplied to the soldiers on the front lines first. Even so, we still have nearly 320,000 soldiers left. How much of the provisions have we consumed? The commoners' situation is even worse than the soldiers. They can't afford to buy provisions, and they can't escape the city gates. If His Majesty can't come up with a concrete solution, I'm afraid that it will soon lead to a mass uprising. If the commoners turn into a mob, think about it. Where will they rush to first? The granary? The government? Or the wealthy families in the capital? This is too scary." The Sun Clan's daughter clenched her handkerchief with trembling hands. "Our family still has guards. 2 fists can't fight 4 hands. Guards are also useless." Qin Yining pursed his lips and said, "My father is a famous official, and I'm also following the imperial edict to cultivate. Our family's target is too high. If the mob rushes in, we won't be able to escape. Besides, there's another layer of consideration." Qin Yining looked at the old madam, second madam, and the Sun Clan. He said in a low voice, "Our family doesn't have much provisions left. If we guard here, not only will we have to face the mob's looting and revenge, what will we do after the provisions run out? Soon, we won't be able to buy food in the city." Heavens! Old madam was so frightened that she started crying. "There's a wolf in front and a tiger in the back. How can we live like this? This group of goddamn idiots." The old fatuous ruler hid the silver and didn't buy food for everyone. "Wasn't it my son who thought of a way to solve the food problem? Not only are they ungrateful, they even want to take revenge on us." The members of the Sun Clan and Second Madam were so frightened that they started sobbing. Miss 8 and Qin Huaining were already in tears. Han's second young mistress was only 3 months pregnant, and at this moment, she was so frightened that she started retching, causing everyone to be nervous. Qin Yining hurriedly comforted them and said, "That's why I said we should quickly pack up our things before things get chaotic. Take the useful and valuable items and follow me to Mount Changchun." They all looked at Qin Yining, their eyes filled with fear at the unknown future. Qin Yining said, "I raised a lot of refugees in my garden on Mount Changchun. Does everyone still remember? I have been using Zhao Yun Agency's money to provide food for them. They are grateful to me. Everyone, follow me. Those refugees in Ningyuan will definitely protect us from being attacked by the mob. The most important thing is that once we run out of food, we won't be able to buy food anywhere. We can still rely on the mountain to eat. Fortunately, it's not winter now. We can hunt in the mountain, dig for wild vegetables, fish in the river, and catch birds in the trees. We won't starve to death. Speaking up to here, Qin Yining relaxed and laughed. Everyone can rest assured. I have lived like this on the mountain for 6 years. I am very skilled at hunting and catching birds. I can even feed our whole family. I will definitely not let everyone starve to death. Everyone was sobbing as they looked at Qin Yining, who was smiling optimistically. For the first time, they truly pitied him. They had been living under the protection of the family Qin. They had been living a carefree life. When they heard that they wouldn't be able to buy food in the city, they panicked and didn't know how to make a living. However, Qin Yining had to face this kind of hardship when he was 8 years old. He didn't have food or water. He had to survive on the mountain alone. That kind of bitter life lasted for 6 years. It took up almost half of his young life, and the most precious thing was that he didn't let himself be defeated by the difficulties. Instead, he survived and grew up to be a smart and tenacious girl. The members of the Sun clan hugged Qin Yining and sobbed. "Sister Yi, my good child, my good child." Qin Yining hugged the members of the Sun clan and didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he comforted, "Mother, don't cry. To be honest, if our family goes to the mountain to make a living, our chances of survival will be very high. We have many people, and we can take care of each other. We also have the protection and support of the people in Ningyuan. We have many people and strength. We won't starve to death. At least we won't have no one to talk to, right?" After hearing the last sentence, the members of the Sun clan felt even sadder. Not only did their precious daughter have to survive alone in the deep mountains, but she also lived alone for 6 years. She didn't even have anyone to talk to. The members of the Sun clan hugged Qin Yining and cried to their heart's content. Old Madam and the others couldn't help but feel sad for Qin Yining. Even more so, they were afraid that they would have to live this kind of inhumane life. Qin Yining comforted his mother and Old Madam. Before he could stop them from crying, Second Master, Third Master, Qin Yu, and Qin Han also returned. When they saw the womenfolk hugging each other and crying, they thought that something big had happened. After hearing Qin Yining's explanation, they heaved a sigh of relief. Second Master said, "Sister Yi and eldest brother are indeed father and son." Eldest brother also said the same thing and told us to come back quickly. Taking advantage of the fact that the city hasn't become hopelessly chaotic, we should quickly pack up and go to Changchun Mountain to seek refuge with the refugees that Sister Yi is raising. The commoners will remember Sister Yi's kindness. Other places won't care about this, but those refugees will definitely protect our family. After hearing Qin Huayuan's words, Old Madam no longer hesitated and immediately said, "Since we are going to escape, let's release the newly bought servants. We don't need their ransom money. If they follow us, we won't be able to raise so many people, right?" However, Qin Yining shook his head. Even if we release them, how can they find new jobs in this kind of world? If they don't have a job, won't they starve to death? Let's bring them up the mountain. Even if they have to eat chaff and swallow vegetables, at least they have a way to survive. It doesn't make sense that our family Qin can coexist peacefully with the refugees on the mountain, but we can't tolerate our own servants who have served us for so long. Sister Yi is right. Let's go together as a family. Second Master also said, "Our family Qin can't do such a heartless thing. If this spread out, how can eldest brother keep a foothold in the army? Don't forget, those guards are also people. They also have relatives in the city. Who knows which one of their relatives is in our family? It's better not to cause any complications." Hearing Qin Yining and Second Master's words, Old Madam's face and ears turned red. She awkwardly waved her hand and said, "All right, all right, all right. I'll listen to you." This old woman has become muddle-headed. Don't pay attention to me. This was the first time that Old Madam had said such self-deprecating words to admit defeat. Qin Yining and Second Master couldn't help but look at each other and let out a sigh of relief in their hearts. At this critical juncture, it wasn't appropriate to cause any more trouble. If Old Madam was obstinate in going about things the wrong way, they would have to waste their time trying to make peace. There would only be benefits and no harm if old Madam was no longer obstinate. Everyone quickly gathered their family members and packed their luggage. Qin Yining specially instructed everyone, lock up the valuables that aren't easy to move and put them in the cellar. As for the rest of the furniture and decorations, don't think about leaving them behind. Bring some practical clothes. Not only summer clothes, but also autumn and winter clothes. If this war crosses into the new year, we still have to spend the winter on the mountain. The entire family went to prepare with worry. They also dismissed the craftsmen who were in charge of renovating the back residence. Everyone from each branch and courtyard gathered together to have a small meeting in low voices. When it was midnight, Second Master had already taken care of the night patrols. Family Qin's family brought their servants and drove a carriage out of the Marquis of Anping's estate, which had long been reduced to ruins, towards the outer city. Qin Yining, Ji Yun, Qiu Lu, Bing Tang, the Sun Clan, and Mother Jin all anxiously sat in a large carriage. The Sun Clan's daughter couldn't stop crying. Mother Jin consoled her in a low voice from the side. Bing Tang and Qiu Lu, who had been affected by the Sun Clan, were also on the verge of tears. Qin Yining laughed and said, "Mother, don't be sad. In one's life, misfortune and fortune always depend on each other. There are 3 ups and downs until one grows old. Don't worry, even if we can't live in luxury, your daughter will definitely not let you starve." Sun Clan's daughter shook her head, "I'm worried about your father, your grandmother, and your aunt." Qin Yining laughed, "You don't have to worry about that. Father is in the army, so naturally, he won't be the first to starve. Moreover, with father's intelligence, he won't let himself be at a disadvantage. Grandmother, you don't have to worry either. I think that grandmother will definitely find a way to bring the entire family to Baochang or the coastal area." Sun Clan's daughter thought about it. Qin Yining's words made sense. She took a few deep breaths before saying, "You're right. They'll be fine. As long as they're alive, there will be a chance to see them again." "That's right. Mother, you just have to take good care of your body. Your daughter will take good care of you." Qin Yining held Sun Clan's hand and shook it affectionately. Sun Clan's daughter smiled with relief and tears in her eyes. She held Qin Yining's hand tightly in her own. Mount Changchun was located in the outer city of the capital. It was 40 li away from the inner city, and there was still some distance between it and the southern city gate of the outer city. It was backed by Mount Changchun, and there was even a spring on the mountain. It was a good place to live in seclusion and recuperate. Because this place was occupied by the imperial family, there were very few people around, and the common people didn't dare to come here easily. Therefore, Qin Yining's family members were allowed to go up the mountain without any obstructions. Master Zhong had been waiting in front of the gate for a long time with a few people on the mountain. Seeing Qin Yining help Sun Clan's daughter out of the carriage, Master Zhong hurriedly led people to greet her. "Boss, you're here." Behind Master Zhong were a tall middle-aged man, a woman in her early 20s who was dressed in men's clothing, and an old man in his 70s who was wearing an old scholar's robe. When they saw Qin Yining, they knelt down and kowtowed. "Greetings, benefactor." Chapter 267. Qin Yining went to help the old man up. "Mr. Ni, please get up. Brother Lu, Sister Ju, you don't need me to help you up, right?" I wouldn't dare. When I see my benefactor, I naturally have to salute." Old Ni bowed again. Ni Liping was over 70 years old. When he first came to the mountain, he was already terminally ill. Qin Yining didn't give up on the elderly and the children, and helped him overcome that obstacle. Scholar Ni's words were reasonable. These days, he was like the village chief of Ning Garden. He also organized a few literate people to teach the children how to read. He had a lot of prestige on the mountain. "Yes, I wouldn't dare. The middle-aged man also bowed. "Kowtowing is a must. If it wasn't for my benefactor's help, I, Lu Dehan, wouldn't be here today." Lu Dehan was 32 years old. He had studied in his early years, but because he wasn't smart, he spent all his family's money and didn't make any progress in his studies. He could only make a living by farming. When he fled with his family, his wife and daughter died on the way. When he went up the mountain, he carried his sick mother. Madame Lu was also very sick, and it was Bing Tang who personally treated her. Lu Dahan's gratitude to Qin Yining couldn't be described with words. However, when they heard Lu Dahan say "I wouldn't dare," the people who heard the news couldn't help but laugh. The young woman in men's clothing kicked Lu Dahan. "You uncouth man, why are you learning from Mr. Ni? Are you waiting for your benefactor to come and help you?" This shrewish woman had a bit of Sun Enyang's temperament. Her surname was Liu, and her name was Ju. She was a widow and had a lot of appeal among women. She was born a hunter and was good at hunting in the mountains. With these skills, many men were convinced by her. Seeing that Lu Dahan was kicked by Miss Ju again, the onlookers laughed. The family Qin people standing behind Qin Yining were shocked by the spirit of the refugees in Ning Garden. When they came, they thought that the people living here would be a group of beggars. Starving beggars must be like tigers and wolves. They would protect their own little chance of survival because they were in a competitive relationship with each other. Whoever grabbed food would live, and whoever didn't would die. How could they be willing to let outsiders in? But now, although these people's clothes were a little tattered, they were all very clean. Moreover, they all had smiles on their faces and were full of kindness. When they looked at the Qin Yining, their respectful attitude was so obvious that the family Qin people couldn't help but be shocked. Master Zhong stood beside the matriarch and the rest and said in a low voice, "Master has always been providing for these people. He gave them jobs, gave them food, treated their illnesses, and let the children study. Master didn't ask them to go out and become refugees. He didn't let them starve or die in the drought. He also didn't abandon any elderly or children. You don't know how great of a thing Master has done." When the family Qin people heard this, the shock in their hearts was indescribable. "Everyone, please come in. We heard that our benefactor's family is coming, so we have already tidied up the best house." Miss Ju greeted them with a smile. Qin Yining said, "How can we do that? Let's follow the old rules. The best house is reserved for the elderly and children. We'll just follow the crowd. Benefactor, don't be so serious with us. Your family can get used to living in the same place." Qin Yining thought about it and felt that it was reasonable. They wouldn't be living on the mountain for a day. It wouldn't be too late to settle down first and then distribute them slowly. Qin Yining smiled and went to help the matriarch, then greeted the family members to come in. The family Qin people supported each other and walked into Ning Garden. At this time, the people of Ning Garden who had heard the news gathered in front of the door. When they saw people coming in, they neatly made way for them and smiled kindly at the family Qin people. Some people greeted Qin Yining loudly, and some people whispered, "This is our benefactor's family. We can't neglect them. It's Wisdom Pan An's family. Is Wisdom Pan An among them? Is that tall old master Wisdom Pan An?" Someone pointed at second old master and asked. Then, a well-informed person said, "Wisdom Pan An is guarding the capital now. He's a hero. Our benefactor's family is all good people. We have to take good care of them." Hearing the discussions of the people, the family Qin people finally understood that Qin Yining had done a lot of bad things outside. The matriarch even felt her face heat up. This was because she had complained about Qin Yining spending money to support people who had nothing to do with him. But looking at it now, wasn't this kind of good karma rewarded with good karma? Back then, Qin Yining had helped these people. Now that they were in trouble, there were immediately so many people who came to help them out of goodwill. They were all basking in Qin Yining's glory. Everyone sighed with emotion as they entered the courtyard. Ning Garden's tall walls were like a small village. There were built houses everywhere. The legendary rare flowers and trees had long been sold to support the people. They walked along a small path until they reached the magnificent building in the middle that looked like a celestial palace. Miss Ju said, "The rooms on the second floor have been tidied up. Benefactor, please help the people in your residence settle down first." Qin Yining thought for a moment and didn't immediately decline. He only asked Master Zhong to help settle the people down while he led the family Qin people upstairs. "We're here to seek refuge. It's good that our family can gather together. Not to mention now, we still have to learn to work to support ourselves in the future. Let's just put up with it for a while. The matriarch wasn't used to it and didn't say anything. However, second old mistress said, "This is already very good. As long as the family is together, what's there to be discontent about?" Second old master smiled and glanced at second old mistress. In this way, the matriarch and Mammy Chin squeezed in with third old master and Chin Yu. Second old master and second old mistress shared a room with Chin Han and his wife. The Sun clan and Mother Jin shared a room with Chin Yining and the 3 maidservants. Eighth young Miss and Chin Huaining lived with the head maidservant next door to Chin Yining's room. At first, everyone wasn't used to it. There were mosquitoes on the mountain, and there were no rules like at home. They couldn't ask the maidservants to serve them. Besides sleeping, there were people talking everywhere. It was as noisy as a market. These people who lived like princes all year round felt uncomfortable. However, Chin Yining adapted well. Early in the morning, Chin Yining got up and washed up. She put on a coarse dress and tied her hair into a long braid. She brought Ji Yun, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu downstairs to prepare breakfast. The large Ning garden was already bustling with activity. Seeing 4 beautiful young girls fetching water, many of the men glanced at them and then lowered their heads to avoid them, blushing furiously. Chin Yining and Ji Yun chopped firewood, Qiu Lu and Bing Tang washed rice and cooked rice. When they started the stove, Chin Yining didn't forget to chat and laugh with ninth young Miss and the other women. During this time, they also received salted vegetables and dried salted fish from the women. A group of children came back with fresh wild flowers and fruits. A little boy in patched clothes ran over with a red face. He stuffed a bunch of colorful wild flowers and a bunch of wild fruits wrapped in big leaves into Chin Yining's hands. Then, he turned around and ran away. Chin Yining couldn't help laughing out loud at his antics. Her tinkling laughter attracted everyone's attention. Ninth young Miss laughed. "Li Go, you little brat. Why do you only know how to give flowers to your benefactor? Why don't you give one to me?" The 7-year-old Li Go stuck his tongue out at ninth young Miss, turned around, and ran away. On the 2nd floor, old Madam looked at the scene downstairs through the window. She was deep in thought. Second Madam smiled and said to second old master, "Our niece isn't simple. As adults, we can't fall behind. Old master, let's change our clothes. We also need to go down and do something. We can't wait for others to serve us." For the latest novel updates, please visit the website. Chapter 268. Just as the family Qin people were gradually adapting to their new lives, the situation in the capital had already reached an extremely tense state. The Tiger Army had firmly guarded the several gates of the outer city and arranged for soldiers to patrol around. The people in the capital had no way to escape and had completely cut off all contact with the outside world. Not to mention that southern Yang's Liu Yingsha controlled the waterways and blocked the food supply. Now, even without Liu Yingsha, even if the retired emperor was willing to reveal the whereabouts of the huge sum of money, it would be difficult for the Yuchi Yang to sell food supplies. The limited food in the city had become an extremely precious thing. The Yuchi Yang took the lead to eat thin porridge and ordered that food supplies be given to the army first. However, the food had to pass through many people's hands and layers of skin were peeled off. In reality, the army didn't get much. Nearly a month and a half had passed. The Yuchi Yang and the Empress had lost more than 10 catties of meat due to hunger, but many officials could still eat white rice. The soldiers on the front lines, on the other hand, were getting worse day by day. Now that the autumn tiger was running rampant, the soldiers were only provided 2 meals a day. Each meal was only given a woman's fist-sized, black, stone-like biscuit of mixed grain bran. Fuck his mother, is this fucking for humans to eat? A soldier guarding the city took a bite of the dry biscuit and almost broke half of his teeth. After chewing for a long time, he stretched his neck and swallowed the food in his mouth with a gulp. Be content, we still have biscuits to eat. The people in the city have already started digging wild vegetables and peeling off tree bark. It is said that many people have already starved to death. There are even people who eat the biscuits. The person who spoke took a small bite of the biscuit as if he was carefully tasting the taste of the food. After that, He drank a mouthful of cold water and carefully swallowed it. Hey, did you hear? Yesterday, Minister Liu's residence was also broken into. The people rushed in and didn't even look at the valuables. They only snatched the food. However, Minister Liu's residence also doesn't have much to eat. On the side, several people were talking at once. These officials are living more comfortably than the emperor. The emperor has been eating thin porridge for more than a month. The officials even have steamed buns at home. We don't eat well, but we won't starve to death. The people are suffering. The people of Daju have surrounded the capital like an iron bucket. They are trying to trap us inside the city. I really don't know how we're going to fight this war. The people of Daju are too cruel. Initially, there were 350,000 Yang soldiers defending the city. Prince Ning had killed 30,000 of them. After handing them over to Dukan, there were only 300,000 left. The Tiger Army, on the other hand, suffered less than 1,000 casualties. The most shameful thing was that the Tiger Army was attacking the city, while they were defending it. With such a great disparity in combat strength, coupled with the panic caused by hunger and the cut-off of supplies, these soldiers couldn't even eat. They felt as if Yang Wangyi and the black and white impermanents were already standing beside them, grinning sinisterly. They looked down at the city walls and saw that the soldiers of the Zhou dynasty were also cooking. They could faintly smell the aroma of stewed meat. Although the Zhou dynasty's supply line was long, at least they were not surrounded. If they did not have enough food, they could still hunt, fish, dig up some wild vegetables, or plant some vegetables. Compared to the trapped capital, the Tiger Army was much more comfortable. Smelling the faint aroma of stewed meat below the city walls, the soldiers began to salivate. The tasteless and hard pancakes were even harder to swallow. At this moment, the sound of footsteps came from the steps. Immediately, someone greeted, Duke, Grand Preceptor Qin. They immediately straightened their backs. They saw Duke An, who was dressed in golden armor and holding a tasseled helmet, walk over. Half a body behind him was Qin Huayuan, who was dressed in a light green Confucian robe. His face was much thinner than before. Behind Qin Huayuan, there was an extremely beautiful manservant and a middle-aged man who was his personal attendant. Everyone hurriedly saluted. Dukan waved his hand and stood at the city gates, looking down. What he saw was an endless stretch of military camps. The Tiger Army's commander's flag fluttered in the wind. The golden tiger on the flag bared its fangs, as if it would pounce down at any moment and devour people. Dukan felt his legs go soft when he saw this scene. When he truly fought against Pang Xiao, he saw the Tiger Army's individual combat ability of 1 against 10. He also saw Pang Xiao's demonic talent in arranging troops. Dukan originally thought that his military advisor was famous for being resourceful. With the ability of wise Pan En, he was able to scheme and kill Pang Zhongzheng. How could he not be able to defeat Pang Zhongzheng's son now? However, in reality, the battle between the two of them was truly a match for each other, a match between a general and a talent. The Tiger Army had few people, but they could fight 1 against 10. They were at a disadvantage when it came to sieging the city. The Dayan dynasty had many people, but their combat strength was weak and disorganized. However, they were at a disadvantage when it came to defending the city. Based on the game between Qin Huayuan and Pang Xiao, the 320,000 troops that were originally handed over to Dukan should have been more than 300,000 now. However, after Dukan avoided battle for a period of time, he fell for Pang Xiao's trap and was lured out of the city. He was trapped in a valley on the west side of the city for a day and a night. At that time, if not for Qin Huayuan's timely rescue, Dukan wouldn't have been able to return, let alone the 20,000 soldiers he brought out. Dukan trembled with fear when he recalled the scene that day. From then on, he would rather die than open the city gates to fight. No matter how the enemy shouted and cursed, he pretended not to hear. Thinking of this, Dukan's entire body trembled. He pointed at Daju's military camp, which was not far from the city gates, and said with a heavy expression, "How do we fight this?" Qin Huayuan stood with his hands behind his back. His gaze was deep. He knew in his heart that no matter how they fought, Dayan was an arrow at the end of its flight. If there was enough food, even if there were only 30,000 people defending the city, he was confident that he could hold off the 100,000 troops of the Tiger Army. He could directly wear down the Tiger Army until they ran out of food and had no choice but to retreat. However, there was no food in the city. The soldiers risked their lives and fought on the battlefield for a full meal. Now that they couldn't even afford to fill their stomachs, could they rely on making empty promises to the soldiers all day long so that they wouldn't starve? Would they be able to fill their stomachs just by thinking about serving the court? There were people in the city who starved to death every day. Under starvation, the common people could also turn into mobs. Which of the large families in the capital had not been invaded by mobs? Some of them had their families broken up, while others had fled in panic. However, robbing these was far from enough for the common people to fill their stomachs. If they couldn't eat wild vegetables, they could still eat tree bark. When all the tree bark was removed, there were still grass roots. However, the capital was only so big. If all the grass roots were eaten, what would happen if there was nothing left to eat? Then only people would be left to eat each other. The common people were like this when they were anxious. What about these soldiers? He was afraid that when the time came, before the soldiers could eat each other, they would start a rebellion. Qin Huayuan lowered his head. Thinking about the chaos in the city, thinking about the emperor who was so hungry that he walked like he was floating, thinking about his family who ate wild vegetables to fill their stomachs, a sense of powerlessness once again swept through his body. Daeju didn't need to expend much effort. As long as they surrounded them for another half a month, the capital would collapse on its own. Cannibalism would be enough to destroy the country. Qin Huayuan closed his eyes. Immediately, his chest felt stuffy. He felt dizzy and his vision blurred. His body swayed and he fell down. Marquis Cao Yuqing noticed that Qin Huayuan's body was swaying and hurriedly supported him. Together with Qi Tai, they slowly laid Qin Huayuan flat on the ground. Dukan was also shocked. He hurriedly said, "Could it be that Grand Preceptor Qin is dizzy from hunger? Quickly bring some water and some food." The soldiers who had just complained that the pancakes were hard to swallow also felt sad. Even Grand Preceptor Qin had fainted from hunger. It seemed that they really were going to run out of food. Qin Huayuan was helped down the city gate tower by Cao Yuqing and Qi Tai. At the foot of the city gate tower, in Daeju's barracks not far away, Pang Xiao put away the monocular. He carefully put it through the silver chain and hung it on his waist. He furrowed his brows in worry. Huzi asked curiously, "Master, what did you see?" "We've already trapped the capital for 43 days. "That's right." Huzi sat cross-legged on the ground next to Pang Xiao and said, "It seems that the capital is almost at the end of its rope. On such a hot day, the common people are trapped in a city hungry. It would be strange if they didn't go crazy." Pang Xiao's brows furrowed even tighter. So, she must also be hungry. As Pang Xiao spoke, he slowly lowered his head and grabbed his hair with both hands. Huzi finally understood what Pang Xiao was thinking. However, after thinking about it, that was indeed the case. There were so many people in the capital, and there were no supplies. Even if they ate everything that could be eaten, a large number of people would starve to death. Under these circumstances, Qin Yining was a weak girl who had not recovered from her injuries and needed to rest. Would she be able to make it through? Huzi only dared to think this in his heart. He definitely did not dare to say it out loud in front of Wang Yi. He could only change the topic. "Wang Yi, should we continue cooking the meat soup? Why don't we let the brothers drink some first?" Actually, the Tiger Army deliberately cooked meat soup every day under the city gate to let the Yang dynasty people smell it. This was also a way for Pang Xiao to shake the Dayan people's hearts. He did this to make the other side unable to understand the true situation of the Tiger Army's supplies. Secondly, he could shake the hearts of the Yang dynasty people. To let the starving people watch the enemy eat meat every day, the mental torture, temptation, and suppression was not something that could be calculated. However, in reality, the Tiger Army's supplies did indeed have a gap. They only had the advantage of freedom compared to the Yang dynasty people. At the very least, they could go further and think of a way. They would not be trapped in the city and starve to death like the people in the capital. Pang Xiao lowered his head and was silent for a long time before saying, "Boyle, this battle must end quickly. If we continue to surround them, this king is afraid." Pang Xiao didn't say anything further. However, there was a resolute look in his sharp eyes. After standing up and pacing for a while, Pang Xiao called Huzi in a low voice and ordered, "Think of a way to send a message to the Marquis of Anping. Tell him that this king wants to meet him in secret. You can arrange the details." Huzi was startled when he heard this. Then, he nodded with a serious expression and quickly retreated. Pang Xiao looked at the closed gates of the capital not far away with his hands behind his back. His heart was so anxious that it was about to grow wings and fly to Qin Yining's side. His beloved woman must be suffering right now, but the worst thing was that he was the one who caused her suffering. However, because of his identity, this battle had to continue. This was the helplessness of being born in a chaotic world. At this time, the person Pang Xiao was worried about was squatting in front of the stove and cooking a large pot of dark brown wild vegetable soup with Miss Ju. To read a novel, please visit Chapter 269. Benefactor, will your family's old lord be able to get used to eating this kind of wild vegetable soup? Scholar Ni asked worriedly. Now that we don't have any more food, we can only eat this. Qin Yining's small face was so thin that it wasn't even as big as a grown man's palm, but her pair of almond eyes seemed even bigger and brighter. Scholar Ni glanced at Miss 8 and Qin Huaining, who were sitting not far behind them and silently crying, and couldn't help but sigh. They were all daughters of the family Qin, but Miss 8 and Qin Huaining couldn't endure hardships. They couldn't go out to dig for wild vegetables, and they couldn't even hunt. When they were asked to do some washing and cooking, they looked helpless. They were simply two young misses who didn't do any household chores. During this period of time, the servants that the family Qin brought up the mountain were all busy with their own tasks. Most of the work fell to the men like Second Old Master, Third Old Master, Qin Yu, and Qin Han. Next to them were Qin Yining and her 3 loyal servant girls who could endure hardships the most. At first, there was still some food stored up on the mountain, and Master Zhong had deliberately prepared a lot of food before coming up the mountain. But no matter how much food there was, it couldn't support the large number of people. The consumption was high, and there was no supply for a long time. Now, not to mention 10 taels of silver per catty, even if one offered 100 taels of silver per catty, they probably wouldn't be able to buy it. As the number of disaster victims increased day by day, hunting and digging for wild vegetables was no longer an easy task. They had taken over the mountain, but the people in the city had dug out all the grass roots and eaten all the tree bark. At first, there were often people who accidentally ate poisonous grass and died from poisoning. But now, more and more people died, and it was hard to tell how they died. Every time there was a famine, the first to die were always the elderly and children. Who on the mountain didn't have a family to feed? Who didn't want their old father, mother, or children to live? The food was bought with Qin Yining's money, so she had absolute authority. Some people secretly harbored evil intentions, but most of the people around them were deeply grateful to Qin Yining. If they did not want to be condemned by the public, they could only suppress it. However, to their surprise, the Qin Yining did not leave all the food for the Qin family, nor did he abandon the elderly and children. After the food reserves gradually decreased, the healthy adults began to mainly eat wild vegetables and game to fill their stomachs. There were so many people in the family Qin. Other than old madam, everyone was learning how to work. The remaining food was given to the old madam and the pregnant Han's second young mistress to eat. 20 days ago, when Qin Yining held a bowl of porridge that could reflect a person's figure and wanted to take a sip, she saw Doggy Lee beside her, who was as skinny as a monkey. She saw the children's wide and watery black eyes. She saw that these children no longer had the energy to pick wild flowers for her. She couldn't swallow the porridge no matter how hard she tried. From that day onwards, Qin Yining did not eat a single mouthful of food. Bing Tang became anxious when she saw this. She told Miss Ju, Lu Dehan, Scholar Ni, and the others about Qin Yining's recent injury. A few days ago, the Qin residents met with a disaster and lost a large number of people. Everyone knows about this. Our miss was seriously injured and barely managed to survive. However, due to excessive blood loss, her foundation was damaged. Before she could recover, she came up the mountain. I can give her medicine, but she can't just starve like this. If the blood loss can't be replenished, I'm afraid it won't benefit her lifespan. Although Bing Tang was young, her medical skills were outstanding. She was also a descendant of the Tang family. Which person on the mountain did not have a headache or fever through her hands? Therefore, everyone on the mountain respected Bing Tang very much. When they heard Bing Tang's words, they became anxious. When they hunted some wild animals or picked some sweet wild fruits, they would first give them to Qin Yining. Scholar Ni was 72 years old this year. Before today, he was given a piece of mixed flour pancake every day. He also gave half of it to Qin Yining. However, Qin Yining refused, so Scholar Ni gave the other half of the pancake to the other children. From today onwards, the elderly and children were also out of food. They had almost caught all the wild animals on the mountain. The weather was dry and it had not rained for a long time, so the wild vegetables grew slowly. The next step would be to eat the bark of the trees. When Qin Yining saw that the soup was almost ready, he scooped a bowl for Scholar Ni. Then, he scooped a bowl for Miss 8 and Qin Huaining. Miss 8 smiled gratefully at Qin Yining. On the other hand, Qin Huaining lowered his head expressionlessly. He was probably so hungry that he did not have the energy to smile. Qin Yining did not mind. He asked Bing Tang, Ji Yun, and Qiu Lu to help him scoop up the wild vegetable soup and send it upstairs. Unexpectedly, the door of the staircase, which was usually not closed, was closed today. Someone even bolted it from the inside. Bing Tang knocked on the door. Not long after, the door was opened slightly. Mammy Qin opened the door. Miss 4. Mammy Qin looked a little embarrassed. Qin Yining smiled and said, "The vegetable soup is ready. The people who went out to hunt are not back yet. Eat some soup to fill your stomach." Mammy Qin smiled and nodded. However, she did not have any intention of letting Qin Yining in. She reached out to take the bowl in her hand. Qin Yining looked at her suspiciously. Then, he saw the bloodstains and white fur left under her fingernails. His heart skipped a beat. He pushed open the door, and his breath was immediately filled with the fragrance of stewed meat. "Mammy Qin, the people who went out to hunt are not back yet. Why are you still hiding meat in the room?" Mammy Qin lowered her head and did not speak. Bing Tang, Ji Yun, and Qiu Lu also came in. Mammy Qin anxiously closed the door. Qin Yining quickly walked inside and found that the windows were all closed. He couldn't help but sneer, "It's a hot day. Don't you think it's hot?" He came to Old Madam's room and pushed open the door. Bang! The Old Madam and Han's second young mistress in the room were shocked. At this time, the two of them were each holding a small rabbit leg and happily gnawing on it. In front of them was a casserole. The soup inside was bubbling. In the corner of the room, there were scattered bloodstains. The snow-white rabbit's fur was peeled off and thrown on the ground. The plum blossom-shaped ribbon that Pang Xiao had personally tied around Bai's neck was now soaked in blood. Qin Yining's head buzzed. You ate my Bai?" Old Madam drank a mouthful of soup and smacked her lips. "Come quickly. I originally wanted to ask you to come. Look at how thin you are. Drink some soup to nourish your body." Han's second young mistress was not pregnant yet, but she no longer had morning sickness. It was the time when she could eat. She didn't even raise her head as she drank the soup. Mammy Qin awkwardly said, "Fourth young mistress, Old Madam and second young mistress both need to eat nourishing food." This morning, Old Madam only ate a bowl of vegetable soup. She was really hungry. Coincidentally, the people who went out to hunt were not back yet. "So, I said. Facing Qin Yining's angry expression, Mammy Qin couldn't explain. "Which day did I not give you meat to eat? When the whole family was eating vegetable soup, I also left the best for you. My little rabbit is not even as big as a woman's palm. After shedding its skin and removing its bones, can it still have 2 tails of meat? Just how heartless are you guys to not even let go of such a small rabbit? The people who went out to hunt will be back soon. You can't wait for even a moment." Old Madam didn't have time to be embarrassed. She threw the spoon into the bowl and sneered, "Is this how filial you are to grandmother? Now that there is a famine, only you would raise this food as a pet. Is 2 taels of meat not meat? 2 taels of meat can nourish your second sister-in-law's body and also let her give birth to a son for your second cousin brother." Han's second young mistress drank the soup and said incoherently, "Sister Yi, later sister-in-law will compensate you with 100 rabbits. Don't be angry. Come and drink the soup. The meat soup cooked in the big pot doesn't even have the taste of meat. Come and taste it." Qin Yining's tears flowed down. Even when she was starving, she never thought of killing Bai because it was personally given to her by Pang Xiao. He said that it was a token between them and also a token of peace between Daiju and Dian. He even personally untied the plum blossom pattern on the jade pendant and tied it around Bai's neck. At that time, they were so close that she could still remember the unique smell on Pang Xiao's body. She understood all the principles and understood that in a war, everyone had to rely on their own ability. However, she saw with her own eyes the commoners starving to death on the streets one by one. She saw with her own eyes the numb and empty eyes of the people who ate their children. When she was the hungriest, she thought of the bowl of cold noodles that Pang Xiao personally cooked for her. She really hoped that Pang Xiao would suddenly appear and save them from the abyss of suffering. No matter how hungry she was, she didn't want to eat Bai. She hid Bai in the room and carefully took care of it. At night, she hugged it to sleep. Because without it, there seemed to be nothing that could prove their pledge of eternal love. However, now that Bai had been eaten, Qin Yining felt that the nerves that had been supporting her all this time had suddenly snapped. She couldn't hold back her tears any longer. When old Madam saw Qin Yining like this, she also felt guilty. She put on a strong front and said, "Isn't it just a beast? As for you, don't think that I don't know where that rabbit of yours came from. After the peace talks in Shihua City, you brought that beast back. Later on, that evil spirit with the surname Feng came to our country to flaunt his power. Let me tell you, that person with the surname Feng caused us to become like this. I only ate the rabbit that he gave you. I haven't even taught you a lesson yet. You have close ties with him. Don't tell me that you still want to rebel." She pinned a label on her because she felt guilty. Qin Yining waved her hand. She didn't want to say another word to someone like old Madam. She picked up the plum blossom net from the blood-stained rabbit's fur and turned to leave old Madam's room. Miss Bing Tang and Qiu Lu hurriedly chased after her and supported Qin Yining on her left and right. Ji Yun sneered, "You've really broadened my horizons. There's actually such an ungrateful and shameless old woman like you in this world. Grand Preceptor Qin is such a glorious person. How can he have a mother like you? Truly, a wicked bamboo produces good bamboo shoot. Or did you steal a child from somewhere and raise him? Filthy. Bah. You're rebelling. Someone come. Someone come. You're now the biggest burden. You need people to serve you all day. Do you still think that you're in the residence?" Ji Yun glared at old Madam in disdain and turned to chase after her. She was afraid that something would happen to Qin Yining. Ji Yun found Qin Yining, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu beside a small stream outside Ningyuan. Qin Yining squatted by the stream and personally washed the bloodstains on the plum blossom net. She was no longer crying. However, when she saw her squatting on the ground and her thin and weak back that seemed to be able to poke through her clothes, Ji Yun's nose turned sour and she almost cried. "Wang Yi, when are you coming? If you don't come, the future Wang Fei will be tortured to death. Not only will she starve, but she will also be tortured in her heart." Ji Yun wanted to persuade her. She opened her mouth but didn't know what to say. At this moment, the sound of footsteps was suddenly heard. A slightly hoarse male voice suppressed his surprise and said breathlessly, "Yi is that you?" Chapter 270. Why did he come? Qin Yining was slightly surprised. She put away the plum blossom net that had been washed clean and went forward to bow. "This subject greets the emperor." Ji Yun, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu also followed suit and bowed. Yu Qiang was sweating profusely as he leaned against a small tree and panted heavily. He waved his hand at Qin Yining and said, Rise, there's no need to be so courteous. Qin Yining stood and respectfully bowed her head as she asked, "Why has the emperor come here?" Yu Qiyang panted for a while. When his breathing stabilized, he said, "I heard that your home was invaded by a mob and your family members disappeared." Jin was very worried and ordered people to investigate. Only then did Jin know that you and your family had moved here. Looking up at the white walls and black tiles of Ningyuan, Yu Qiyang remembered that this place was given to Qin Yining by Pang Xiao. He frowned unhappily. But he couldn't blame Qin Yining for anything. After all, she was just a weak woman. Also, if she didn't make arrangements early and brought her family Qin up the mountain, her family members would have been injured by the mob. Yu Qiyang laughed at himself. As the emperor, he was starving all day. He couldn't give Qin Yining anything. What could he use to pursue her? Could it be that he could fill his stomach with paintings and calligraphy? You can all leave. Jin has something to say to Xuansu. Yu Qiyang's mood had calmed down and he waved his hand at the people beside him. Eunuch Lu and the guards bowed and left. Qiu Lu, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang had no choice but to leave the space for the two of them. Yu Qiyang leaned against the tree and carefully looked at the person he thought about day and night. She had lost a lot of weight. Her small face was the size of a palm, but it made her eyes look bigger and brighter. Her nose and lips were very pretty. Even though she was wearing a coarse dress and her hair was simply tied into a long braid, her lack of makeup showed her natural beauty. She couldn't be compared to those beauties who wore makeup. Yu Qiyang found that he still liked her. When he saw her, his heart would still throb. He smiled helplessly. Now that the country was about to fall, he actually had the leisure to think about these things. It was just that the past few days had been too painful, and he had nowhere to vent the pent-up frustrations in his heart. Although Duke and Guogong Li Mian was the commander-in-chief, he avoided the battle and repeatedly requested to restart the peace talks. His words actually had the intention of persuading them to surrender. How could the Yu Qiyang's dignity as an emperor be trampled on like this? However, the current situation did not allow him to do so. Yu Qiyang tiredly sat down on the floor and said, "You sit down too. Save some energy and chat with me." Seeing Yu Qiyang like this, Qin Yining lowered his guard a little. He found a rock 3 steps away from him and sat down. Yu Qiyang raised his head and looked at the leaves that were being blown by the wind. He leaned against the tree trunk and closed his eyes. After a long time, he slowly said, "Did you know that retired emperor disappeared yesterday?" Qin Yining looked at Yu Qiyang in surprise. Yu Qiyang tiredly said, "The eunuch who delivered the food to retired emperor found that the food was not eaten, so he thought that something had happened to retired emperor. However, after searching the entire palace, he could not find him. A perfectly fine person just disappeared into thin air. Your Majesty, do you believe that?" Qin Yining frowned. "What?" Yu Qiyang looked at Qin Yining. Qin Yining said, "A perfectly fine person would not disappear into thin air. If there was no one outside who helped retired emperor escape, then it means that there is a secret passage in the palace." "Secret passage?" Yu Qiyang sat up straight. "How did you think of this?" "Because when we captured Cao Guozhong, it was said that we found a secret passage in his residence. A crafty rabbit has 3 burrows. How could these old foxes not leave a way out for themselves?" Cao Guozhong and retired emperor had interacted for a lifetime. No matter how muddle-headed retired emperor was, he was still very scheming. Even Cao Guozhong had a secret passage, so retired emperor would not be unprepared. Yu Qiyang's reaction was slow, but he quickly figured out the crux of the matter. He said, "You are right. Why didn't we think of it?" He immediately turned around and called for an imperial bodyguard to come over. He whispered a few words into his ear. That imperial bodyguard bowed and quickly retreated. Yu Qiyang stared blankly at a place. He leaned against the tree trunk and sat in a daze for a while before saying, "It seems that retired emperor wants to take that large sum of money to southern Yang." Qin Yining smiled and did not say anything. If retired emperor took that large sum of money to southern Yang and wanted Liu Yingxia and the new emperor of southern Yang to recognize him as the former emperor, then he was too foolish and naive. They would accept the money, but retired emperor's life could not be guaranteed. It was not easy for him to sit in that high and mighty position. Even if Southern Yang was only a small country formed by combining a few provinces and counties in Dian, its area was still as large as Wo Nation and Goguryeo combined. No one would give up on it. While Qin Yining was silent, Yu Qiyang had already thought of many things. Finally, he closed his eyes and leaned against the tree trunk. He faintly said, "It seems that the heavens are not helping us. Li Mian, that old thing, has been persuading us all day long. We trusted him and even conferred his daughter as the empress. However, he is lazy and greedy for life, afraid of death. After leading the army for such a long time, he has only attacked once. And that was because he fell into the enemy's trap. Not to mention the loss of 20,000 soldiers and horses. If Grand Preceptor Qin did not rescue him in time, Li Mian, that old thing, would have died outside. The heavens are not helping us in Dian. Natural disasters and man-made disasters have caused our talents to wither." Qin Yining now understood why the emperor came here. He was filled with depression and had nowhere to vent, so he came to find her to vent. At the same time, he already had thoughts of retreating and wanted to negotiate. However, in the current situation, negotiating was simply a dream. Qin Yining did not mind pouring a bucket of cold water on Yu Qiyang. The peace talks that Dukan mentioned are actually not appropriate. Oh! Yu Qiyang looked at Qin Yining with hopeful eyes. Qin Yining said, "If we want to negotiate, then we need to have the same status as the other countries. We also need to have conditions that can satisfy both sides. Only then can it be called a peace talk. To say something that will boost the morale of others and diminish our own prestige, Daeju currently has an overwhelming advantage. What right do they have to negotiate with us? Even if they agree to negotiate, what conditions can we offer them that can move them?" This sentence instantly made Yu Qiyang feel as if he had been plunged into an ice cave. Originally, he still had a bit of hope in his heart, but at this moment, there was nothing left. That's right, he was now a stray dog. What right did they have to negotiate with him? However, if there was no hope, why did Dukan try to persuade him again and again? Could it be, that old thing Li Mian? I'm afraid that persuading us to negotiate is fake. Persuading us to surrender is real. He wants us to be disloyal and unfilial. How can we face the Yuchi family's ancestors? He wants us to be the ruler of a destroyed country. Yu Qiyang thought about the Emperor Emeritus who had disappeared with a large sum of money. He thought about what the Emperor Emeritus had said to him. He then thought about the faces of the people in the imperial court who were in danger. His heart ached as if someone was stabbing it with a needle. So what if we were born in the wrong time? Your Majesty, please do not be too sad. As long as we are alive, there is hope. Qin Yining looked down and softly persuaded. Chapter 271. When Qin Yining saw Yu Qiyang's expression, she knew that he had misunderstood. She just wanted to persuade Yu Qiyang to get over it and not hurt his body. However, Yu Qiyang seemed to have thought of something else. Your Majesty, this subject's daughter feels that nothing is more important than the Emperor's health. Qin Yining could only kneel and say softly, "You are the true ruler of Dian. Your existence is the reason why we continue to persevere." Yu Qiyang focused his gaze on Qin Yining. His gaze gradually softened from suspicion, but then he gave a bitter laugh. "How can Jin be worthy of being the ruler of a country in this state? How can I be worthy of being the reason why the people continue to persevere? It's because Jin is here that the people have to suffer like this." When he came out now, he didn't even dare to use the Emperor's ceremonial guard. It wasn't just because everyone was too hungry to put on a show for him, it was also because he was afraid that if he came out in his dragon robe, he would be eaten alive by the people filled with hatred. Yu Qiyang asked himself several times, was it right or wrong for him to continue to fight against the people of Daeju? Now that there was already the southern Yang in the south, his country had already been divided into two. The reason why he was clenching his teeth and not relenting was because he didn't want to be the ruler of a fallen country and be recorded as a shameful event in the history books. He didn't want to be ashamed to meet his ancestors 100 years later. But when he saw the bark of the trees in the capital being stripped and the children curled up in a corner, He felt that he was the most selfish person in the world. For his dignity, he was sacrificing the lives of countless innocent people. Stand up. Jin knows how loyal your family Qin is. Yu Qiyang shook his head with a bitter smile. It's just that Jin is really confused right now. Qin Yining stood up and sat back down on the stone. She lowered her head and didn't say anything. She understood that talking about court politics would cause one to burn oneself. Yu Qiyang sat there in a daze for a long time. Qin Yining sat there with him in a daze. By the time Yu Qiyang came back to his senses, there were already sounds of men talking in the direction of Ning Garden. Yu Qiyang looked at Qin Yining questioningly. Qin Yining explained, perhaps the people who went into the mountains to hunt and dig for wild vegetables have returned. The Yu Qiyang smiled and said, you're smart. You're with so many people, living near the mountains and rivers. You can take care of each other. He supported himself against the tree trunk and stood up. He patted the dust off his body and said, Little Lu. Here. Eunuch Lu, who was standing in the distance, immediately came over. Your Majesty. Give it to fourth young Miss Yes. Eunuch Lu immediately called for the imperial bodyguards who had just escorted them over. Only then did Qin Yining realize that the imperial bodyguards were all carrying baskets on their backs. The two imperial bodyguards put down the baskets. Inside the baskets were a bag of fist-sized black biscuits that were commonly eaten in the army. There was also a bag of medicinal herbs that had already been packed. Yu Qiyang was a bit embarrassed. He smiled self-mockingly and said, This emperor knows that you have a lot of people here. This emperor was afraid that you would have starved long ago. Unfortunately, this emperor has gold and silver, but cannot buy food. Don't be disdainful of these. There isn't much dried food, so you should eat with the people around you first. You can take the rest back. As for the medicinal herbs, this is the medicine that this emperor ordered people to prepare to nourish your blood and body. It seems that your body hasn't fully recovered yet. Don't be too foolish and give everything to others. In any case, you should at least eat a few meals. Look at how thin you've become. Yu Qiyang sighed and shook his head. He was the emperor of a country, but he couldn't even let the woman he liked eat a full meal. No one could be in such a predicament. Qin Yining very gratefully knelt down and bowed, Your Majesty's kindness in providing timely assistance, this subject's daughter will engrave it in her heart. Thank you, Your Majesty. Quickly get up. Seeing that she looked so weak from hunger that she could be blown away by the wind, her small face was deathly pale, and her lips had no color, Yu Qiyang felt a wave of pain in his heart. Stay here and eat a flatbread first. Qin Yining looked at him with a bit of surprise. Yu Qiyang continued, Your servant girls are quite loyal to you. Even at this time, they didn't abandon you and leave. Call them over and eat a full meal together. This is an imperial edict. This emperor will watch you eat. You can only go back after you've finished eating. Qin Yining lowered her eyes and thanked him emotionally. She then called Ji Yun, Bing Tang, and Qiu Lu over. The four of them each took a hard flatbread and began to eat. Yu Qiyang looks at Qin Yining, who is like a little hamster. The mixed flour pancake, which is hard and cold, tastes like the imperial cuisine in her mouth. Yu Qiyang's nose twitches and tears almost fall down. This couldn't continue. If this continued, all the citizens of the capital would be buried with his selfishness. When Qin Huayuan opened his eyes, he found himself in an unfamiliar room. When he looked out of the window, all he could see was darkness. It was probably night time. He didn't immediately get up, but calmly recalled what had happened today. After eating a bowl of thin porridge, he felt dizzy and wanted to sleep. Then, he fell asleep on the table. When he woke up, he was already here. It seemed like the person who brought him here didn't want to kill him. At least, they didn't want to kill him yet. You're awake. Just as Qin Huayuan was letting his imagination run wild, he heard the door creak open. A tall figure carried a tray with a big bowl on it. The person who came in later carried a candlestick. Because the candlelight was behind him, Qin Huayuan didn't see who it was until the person behind him put the candlestick on the table. Qin Huayuan sat up. His expression didn't change as he looked at the steaming hot Yang Chun noodles on the table. Then, He glanced at Pang Xiao, who was wearing patched clothes and dressed like a disaster victim. He suddenly sneered, "So it's you. What? Did you bring this old man here to treat me to a meal?" Pang Xiao didn't care about Qin Huayuan's sarcastic words. He still bowed properly and said, "Father-in-law, this son-in-law was rude. This time, I really acted rashly. But if I let you know in advance, it would be inconvenient for me to act. Secondly, I didn't want to frame you for being unfaithful. So, this son-in-law used the medicine rashly. Please forgive me." Qin Huayuan's eyebrows twitched when he heard this. Father-in-law? Son-in-law? With the current situation of the two countries, how could the two families have such fate? This old man doesn't deserve it. Wang Yi, please be careful with your words. This old man's daughter is as pure as ice and as pure as jade. She has never been involved with anyone. What do you think of this old man's daughter by speaking like this? Pang Xiao wiped his sweat and said in his heart, "It's over. This time, I've offended my father-in-law. They are indeed father and daughter. When they are fierce, they are equally difficult to deal with. Father-in-law, please don't be angry. It's just that Sister Yi and I have already made a lifelong commitment. In this life, I will marry no one but her, and she will marry no one but me." Ridiculous. Where do you get the confidence that she will marry no one but you? Qin Huayuan stood up angrily and flicked his sleeves. If it were in the past, she might have been moved by your actions. But after she saw with her own eyes those people who swapped children for food and experienced hell, do you still expect her to still not care? My daughter is a human, not a saint. Where do you get the nerve to be so confident in yourself that you can do whatever you want? Chapter 272. Father-in-law, please calm down. Pang Xiao saw that Qin Huayuan was enraged. So, he didn't say anything. He knelt down without any hesitation. He didn't care about his status as a prince. Moreover, he was the commander-in-chief of the great Jew's tiger army. Father-in-law, if you are angry, you can reprimand me however you want, but please don't say such hurtful words. I know that Sister Yi will definitely suffer greatly in this war. Not only Sister Yi, but the people will also suffer greatly. That is why I forced you to come here today. Father-in-law, you have eyes and ears. How can you not know that your son-in-law has no choice? You feel sorry for the people and Sister Yi. You can scold me however you want, but please don't say that I don't cherish her. I feel like my heart is being twisted by a knife. Pang Xiao knelt with his head down. The more he spoke, the more depressed he became. In fact, he couldn't blame Qin Huayuan for being angry with him. When he heard Huzi describe the tragic situation in Jingdu, he couldn't help but feel distressed. When he thought about how Qin Yining was in such an environment, with his injuries not yet healed and he had to starve all day, his heart ached. What's more, Qin Huayuan was in such a situation all day. Qin Huayuan looked down at Pang Xiao. For a moment, he didn't know what to do with him. From the perspective of the country, this person was a sinner who wanted to trample on Dian. But from a personal point of view, this person was an outstanding young man. He was both literate and martial, and had both talent and appearance. He was sincere to his daughter. Moreover, in terms of planning and conquering, not only did he display his strategy, but he also had a benevolent heart that loved the people. This could be seen from the fact that he had resisted the imperial edict and refused to massacre the city. Qin Huayuan sat down tiredly. He rubbed his forehead and said, "How is she a city now?" Pang Xiao was smart. When he heard Qin Huayuan ask this, he knew that his father-in-law wasn't so angry that he didn't want to acknowledge him. He wanted to give him a chance. Pang Xiao immediately said, "Everything is fine in Shihua City. But I heard that 9 out of 10 houses in Shihua City are empty. Your tiger army has killed all the people there and hung their heads on high poles like lanterns." Qin Huayuan sneered. "Are you trying to fool me? Father-in-law, please understand. That was just a tactic to disturb the enemy. In fact, it was to save money for a wife, but Pang Xiao would never say that." Seeing this, Huzi, who was kneeling beside him, also explained, "Master Qin, I'm sorry. My family's Wang Yi indeed did not indiscriminately kill the innocent. Those people who were beheaded in front of Shihua's city gate were originally criminals in the city. After Wang Yi entered the city, he investigated both openly and secretly, and recorded down the names of those rich and heartless people whom the common people called Flayed Skin, King of Hell, and so on. Once their crimes were verified, they were severely punished. Now you're saying that you're here to uphold justice. Qin Huayuan's anger had subsided a lot, but he still felt awkward looking at Pang Xiao. He simply turned his face to the side and refused to look at him. Pang Xiao heaved a sigh of relief when he saw this. He thought that he would be able to keep his identity as his son-in-law. So, he kowtowed again and said, "Father-in-law, this son-in-law wouldn't dare to do such a heartless thing. But, a war is a war. We are standing on different sides. So, there will always be a time when we can't control ourselves." Pang Xiao straightened his body as he observed Qin Huayuan's expression. When he saw that Qin Huayuan was not displeased, he continued, "Just like in father-in-law's heart, could it be that you have long given up on defending the city for the sake of the common people?" Qin Huayuan's heart shook when he heard this. He closed his eyes and sighed softly. On the one hand, it was whether the Dian royal family could continue to rule this territory. On the other hand, the common people in the territory sacrificed themselves for the power of the superior. How could he not have such thoughts? However, he was a muddle-headed person in the end, so he could not be the one to stand out. "Get up. As Wang Yi, the commander-in-chief of the army, how can you kneel when you see this old man? Even if I don't kneel, you won't be appeased. If I put on airs when I see you, how can we continue to talk about this?" Pang Xiao cursed in his heart, but in the end, he breathed a sigh of relief. He stood up and brought the noodles over, saying with a smile, "Father-in-law, you've been unconscious for a day and haven't eaten yet. Eat the noodles first, and then we can continue talking." Qin Huayuan did not have much of an appetite. After being hungry for a long time, his stomach seemed to have become smaller, so he did not have much of an appetite. However, looking at the noodles that Pang Xiao brought over, the broth was clear, the noodles were thin, and the noodles were evenly distributed. There were also green vegetables and green onions scattered on top, and the fragrance was very appetizing. Qin Huayuan could not let Wang Yi, who was from Daeju, carry a bowl for him all the time, so he took the bowl and took a sip of the broth with a spoon. It tasted fresh and salty, and it could not help but arouse his appetite. He simply picked up his chopsticks and ate. When Pang Xiao saw that his father-in-law was willing to eat the noodles he cooked, he felt a little relieved. When Qin Huayuan finished eating, Huzi brought over a cup of tea and said, "Old Master Qin, please enjoy." Qin Huayuan rinsed his mouth and said, "The noodles are cooked well. If father-in-law thinks it's good, then it's the good fortune of these noodles. Sister Yi also likes to eat the noodles I cook." When Pang Xiao thought of Qin eating, the smile on his face softened a little. "You cooked it?" "Yes, my son-in-law's family ran a restaurant before he joined the army. I like to cook, so I learned a few tricks from my grandfather and the chef he hired." Millimeter. Qin Huayuan lowered his eyes and pondered. Pang Xiao had already expressed his sincerity very clearly, so he could not continue to pretend to be a guest. Firstly, it would not benefit the two countries, and secondly, he was afraid that his daughter would be wronged. What if Sister Yi still had feelings for this brat? He could not interfere with their good fortune. Qin Huayuan stood up and said solemnly, "Just now, we were speaking in a private capacity. Now, let's talk about official business. Wang Yi, did you invite me here today for something important?" Pang Xiao secretly praised his father-in-law's quick-wittedness. He treated the situation just now as a personal grudge, and it would not affect the relationship between the two countries at all. He was also happy to see this. He took out a thick letter from his bosom and said, "Grand Preceptor Qin, I invited you here in private today to find a way to survive for the people here. Please take a look at this letter." Qin Huayuan took it curiously. At first glance, the handwriting on the letter changed color. Qin Huayuan had a photographic memory. He could distinguish the handwriting of his colleagues. The handwriting on this letter was clearly Duke Anghua's, Li Mion's. Thinking about Duke Anghua's attitude toward the war, he had already guessed the contents of the letter. He hurriedly opened the letter and read 10 lines at a time. This was a letter of allegiance. The general content was that as long as Prince Zhongshiren said a word and agreed on a time, Duke Angua would be willing to open the city gates and welcome the Tiger Army into the capital. He was also willing to cut off the head of Grand Preceptor Qin Huayuan and offer it to Prince Zhongshiren to avenge Prince Zhongshiren and express his sincerity. Most importantly, at the end of the letter of allegiance, there was a long list of names. Every name on this list was written in blood. The handwriting of each name was different, and there was a handprint behind each name. It actually included 90% of Dian's military generals and nearly half of the civil officials. Qin Huayuan smiled sadly. How could he fight this war? He couldn't fight at all. I understand. Qin Huayuan calmly put the letter back into the envelope. This official still has to present this letter to the emperor. Pang Xiao nodded and said, Don't worry, Grand Preceptor Qin. This king guarantees that he will not kill a single person. He was guaranteeing that he would not kill the people. He was also guaranteeing that he would not kill Qin Huayuan. Chapter 273. Pang Xiao's people were very efficient. In the wee hours of the morning, they safely sent Qin Huayuan back to the city. Qin Huayuan stepped into the morning light and went to see Yu Qiyang without hesitation. He wasn't a person who would waste his life on an insignificant problem. Knowing that the situation was hopeless, he still wanted to die to prove his sincerity. After surviving under the Emperor Emeritus for so many years and experiencing so many ups and downs, Qin Huayuan had changed from a simple-minded person full of ideals to a person who knew how to think for his family. Since he knew that he couldn't defeat Diegu, it was better to think about how to obtain the most benefits for the emperor. Yu Qiyang was in a very good mood today. Perhaps it was because he had seen Qin Yining yesterday. Even now, when he closed his eyes, he could still remember Qin Yining's docile appearance when he sent him down the mountain. Or perhaps it was because after seeing Qin Yining, some of the stubbornness in his mind had finally been shattered. Yu Qiyang felt as if he had been stripped of his heavy shackles. His entire being felt lighter from the bottom of his heart. Your Majesty, Grand Preceptor Qin requests an audience. Quickly invite him in. Yu Qiyang had something to say to Qin Huayuan, so his voice was somewhat urgent. Not long after, Qin Huayuan quickly walked into the imperial study. He bowed and said, This subject greets the emperor. May the emperor be in good health. You may rise. Please sit. Yu Qiyang had a smile on his face. Qin Huayuan thanked him and sat down in the official's hat chair that was brought over by the palace eunuchs. He said with a smile, looking at the emperor's expression, It seems like there's something joyous today. Yu Qiyang smiled and said, It's not that there's anything joyous. It's just that I've thought through some things. I feel much lighter in my heart. You came at the right time today. Even if you didn't come, Zhen would have summoned you. Qin Huayuan saw that Yu Qiyang seemed to be very interested, so he cooperated and asked, What did the emperor think through? Yu Qiyang stood up and sternly said, Yesterday, I went out for a patrol in plain clothes. I walked around the city for a long time and saw the tragic state of the city. Qin Huayuan saw that the emperor's brows were tightly knitted, and he couldn't hide the pain in his heart. He hurriedly knelt down and said, This humble subject is incompetent and can't share your Majesty's burdens. No, you've done very well. The Yu Qiyang helped Qin Huayuan up and said, Grand Preceptor Qin has done a lot for me and the Dian people. We can only blame the heavens for not protecting us. We didn't have any advantage at all. Yu Qiyang smiled bitterly and said, When Imperial Father handed the throne to me, it wasn't because he valued my talent, but because he didn't have anyone else to inherit the throne, so he wanted me to take the blame for him. He hid a large amount of money and threw an empty shell to me. It was nothing more than wanting to leave some capital for a comeback in the future. Once the Dian dynasty was defeated, he wouldn't want to be the humiliating emperor of a defeated country. At that time, the history books would only record that I was the last emperor of the Dian. At this point, Yu Qiyang closed his eyes and clenched his fists. He said, To be honest, my heart is full of resentment. I've never received any care from Imperial Father. As I slowly grew up, Imperial Father didn't look at me with the love of a father for his son, but with a deep fear. I know. He's afraid that I'll take away his position. The care he gives me is not as much as Imperial Uncle. Sometimes, I wish that the Dayan country was ruled by imperial uncle. Perhaps then I wouldn't have reached the end so quickly. But it's too late. Yu Qiyang's back was facing Qin Huayuan. He didn't want Qin Huayuan to see his cowardly tears. However, his thick nasal voice had already revealed the fact that he was crying as an emperor and as a man. Qin Huayuan knelt on the ground again and quietly listened to Yu Qiyang's confession. He also felt a wave of sorrow in his heart. When the Emperor Emeritus, that incapable ruler, was in power, he wasn't just afraid of Yu Qiyang. He was afraid of everyone. Yu Qiyang wasn't the only one who felt pain. As a subject, he had dedicated most of his life to the imperial court. Wasn't he still played by the Emperor Emeritus in the palm of his hand? If he wanted to kill him, he would be killed. If he wanted to, he would be praised. He could understand Yu Qiyang's pain. This was because he also felt the same pain. The pain of not being able to fulfill his ambitions was probably not much worse than the pain of not being able to get his father's attention, right? When I went out yesterday, I saw the scene of children being swapped for food. Yu Qiyang's voice started to tremble. This Jun saw with my own eyes an old woman in ragged clothes nibbling on a child's hand that was roasted until it was half cooked. This Jun really wished that she could kill herself. I didn't want to be the ruler of a fallen country, so I refused to admit my failure. I gritted my teeth and persevered until now. However, for the sake of my laughable self-esteem, innocent people were sacrificed. Grand Preceptor Qin, I was wrong. I was wrong from the beginning. Yu Qiyang turned around. There were tears on his face, but his eyes were unprecedentedly firm. From the beginning, I shouldn't have plunged the people into the abyss of suffering for my own selfish reasons. As the emperor, I can't seek happiness for the people. Instead, I have to use the people as a tool to build my status. How am I different from my father? We're both selfish and fatuous. Your Majesty, you've already done very well, Qin Huayuan persuaded. If you had ascended the throne 10 years earlier, Dayan wouldn't have perished. When you took over, some things were already irreversible. You can't be blamed for this. Qin Huayuan's persuasion was actually exaggerated. After all, Yu Qiyang's talent was limited. However, this sentence was the most timely affirmation for Yu Qiyang when he was at his most self-denying. Yu Qiyang felt that as long as there was one person who could understand him, then he wouldn't feel so wronged when he was the ruler of a fallen country and saved the lives of the remaining people in the city. Grand Preceptor Qin, thank you. Yu Qiyang smiled, but his tears flowed like a spring. He said with a heavy nasal voice, I can't be selfish anymore. I can't let everyone be buried with my throne. I've decided to surrender to Daju. Your Majesty. Qin Huayuan's voice choked with emotion. Although he knew this would be the result, once this decision was made, the country that Qin Huayuan had spent most of his life defending would be destroyed. At the same time, the efforts and youth he had invested in it would be destroyed, as well as the great dreams he had when he was young and full of mettle. He was very sad and also very helpless. However, he wasn't a person who would be emotional. What was done was done. There was nothing he could do to reverse the situation, so he had to think of another way out. Your Majesty. Qin Huayuan wiped his tears and took out the envelope with trembling hands. He said, this official woke up early this morning and found this thing next to my pillow. When I opened it, it was really. Your Majesty, this official doesn't dare to speak rashly. Your Majesty, please take a look. Yu Qiyang was startled when he heard this. He hesitantly took the letter. After he opened it and carefully read it, his thin and pale face was completely devoid of color. Although he had already decided to surrender, the feeling of making his own decision and surrendering after being betrayed was really different. These people are really good. Good. They are my good officials and my good father-in-law. The emperor looked up to the sky and howled. He wailed, the generals have all rebelled. Half of the civil officials have rebelled. Even my father-in-law has betrayed me. My country has already fallen. What's the point of fighting? What else can I do other than surrender? Qin Huayuan was overcome with grief. He also closed his eyes and cried. The ruler and official hugged each other and wept bitterly. At this time, neither of them noticed that outside the imperial study, Empress Li Yangyang had quietly retreated. She gave Eunuch Lu, who was by the Emperor's side, a look and quickly left. Chapter 274. After Li Yangyang left the imperial study, she immediately called for her most trusted maidservant to come over and whispered to her, "Hurry up and go see my father. Tell him that the emperor already knows that he contacted the officials to prove his loyalty to the great Zhou dynasty. Grand Preceptor Qin just met the emperor in the imperial study and gave the proof of allegiance to the emperor. After the emperor saw it, he was furious and told him to take precautions. Go quickly." The maid was so scared that her face turned pale. She quickly nodded and ran out. Li Yangyang lost all her strength and fell into a round chair. If the matter was exposed, what would the emperor think of their Li family? How would he treat her? As soon as this thought appeared, Li Yangyang took a deep breath and confidently suppressed it. The country was about to fall. The emperor didn't even have enough food to eat. How would he have the strength to deal with the Li family? The country was in danger and needed people. If the emperor dealt with the Li family, wouldn't he be afraid of being alone and without help in the future? Thinking of this, Li Yanyan's worried heart relaxed. What Li Yangyang didn't know was that after Qin Huayuan left the imperial study, Eunuch Lu told Yu Qiyang in detail about Li Yanyan's visit. Yu Qiyang sneered, "You really think that Zhen is a soft persimmon that can be easily bullied? I just think that they are a bit useful." Eunuch Lu said, "Everything is under consideration, Your Majesty. This servant has absolutely nothing to worry about." Yu Qiyang thought for a bit, then called Eunuch Lu to his side and whispered a few words in his ear. After Eunuch Lu heard this, he immediately bowed and left to handle the matter. At the same time, Li Yanyan's maid had already sent a message to Guogonggong as quickly as possible. When Guogonggong heard this news, his entire body stiffened. His mind was in a mess and he couldn't say a word for a long time. The few aides beside him also furrowed their brows, their faces gloomy. "Guogonggong, what should we do? If the emperor finds out about our joint efforts, I'm afraid that the emperor will be furious." "That's right, High Duke. Your reputation can't be ruined at this time. We have to think of a countermeasure." Hearing the discussions of his advisors, Dukan gradually calmed down. He sneered, "What are you afraid of?" When he stood up, there was no longer any trace of panic on Dukan's face. He sneered and said, "Now that things have come to this, what is there to be afraid of? In the end, this old man's name wasn't the only one signed on the Pledge of Allegiance. As the saying goes, the law cannot punish the masses. Even if His Majesty wants to punish me, could it be that he can kill this old man and all of the court's generals? Without this old man, can His Majesty find another person to lead the troops? Without generals, how is he going to fight a war?" Hearing Dukan's words, the advisors felt a bit more at ease. After careful analysis, all the ministers in the court were about to starve to death. The emperor was in power, but he couldn't even feed his ministers. If he wanted to punish them, what position did he have to punish them? "You're right, High Duke." A few of the aides also relaxed. Dukan stroked his white beard. The sharp eagle eyes on his square face narrowed. "I didn't think that Qin Brat would have the ability to obtain this old man's pledge of allegiance. He even took the initiative to present it to His Majesty and complain about this old man. It seems that this old fox's age isn't wasted. This old man has underestimated him." Hearing this, one of the advisors laughed and said, "To say that he is loyal to Qin Huayuan is nothing more than that. He is just a shameless person fishing for fame. He took the initiative to file a complaint because he wanted to gain benefits from both sides. Not only could he expose the Duke in front of the emperor, but he could also gain benefits from the great Zhou dynasty. That pledge of allegiance, could it have flown over on its own? Wasn't it because he somehow got in touch with Da Zhu? It's clear that although he said righteously that he couldn't give up, in reality, he already had thoughts of surrendering." Dukan nodded in agreement. He believed that his talent wasn't inferior to Qin Huayuan's. However, everyone with the surname Qin was famous everywhere. There wasn't a single person in the world who didn't know Qin Huayuan, but how many people knew Dukan, Li Mian? The two of them had different ideas. For example, during the defense of the city, Princess An, Zhongwenzhong, wanted to win and secretly advocated surrendering. However, Qin Huayuan advocated holding on and not giving up. As a result, Qin Huayuan's position went against the interests of Dukan's faction. More importantly, of their two daughters, one was the emperor's legitimate empress, but she didn't receive the emperor's love. The other was truly loved by the emperor. Even though he was forced to become a layman, the emperor still couldn't forget her. With all these factors added together, it was impossible for Nguogong and Qin Huayuan to ever get along. Currently, in Dian, Dukan was being suppressed by Qin Huayuan. When Daju's secret emissary came to secretly contact Dukan, he said that the emperor of the Zhou dynasty had promised that if they surrendered in Dian, all surrendered officials would be given preferential treatment and wouldn't bury any talents. In other words, if they went to Daju, they would still be officials. However, if this situation continued, even if they went to Daju, Dukan would still be suppressed by the world-famous Qin Huayuan. Why? It was already like this in Dian. If he went to Daju, would he, Li Mian, still be suppressed? Thinking of this, Dukan's eyes gradually became cold. We can't let the family Qin go to Daju alive. Didn't that person from Daju order us to secretly get rid of the family Qin Huayuan? Otherwise, we'll use this matter to wipe out the family Qin Huayuan and the family Qin Huayuan. Hearing this, the aides all became excited. A few of them began to think and help Dukan come up with a plan. The heavy rain in the early morning cooled down the raging heat of the autumn. The people in Ning Garden were all busily preparing utensils to store water. Thinking that perhaps after this nourishment, the wild vegetables and fruits on the mountain would grow a little faster, everyone's faces relaxed a little, which was rare to see. Qin Yining was busy with the work at hand with the Sun Clan and whispering to each other when someone came in with a message. Benefactor, there's a master outside the gate. He says he's one of your father's men and that your father has something important to discuss with you, so he's come to see you. Qin Yining was stunned. His father hadn't come to the mountain for a long time. The two sides had lost contact for a month. Qin Yining was also worried about Qin Huayuan's situation. As soon as he heard that his father's man had come, he immediately said, "Thank you. I understand." Qin Yining put down the pot in his hand and said with a smile, "Mother, I'll go out and take a look. Perhaps father wants to talk to me about something." The Sun Clan smiled reluctantly and nodded. "Go ahead. Since your father didn't say he wanted to talk to me, I won't go. I think it's Chi Tai. Help me ask about your father's situation in detail." Qin Yining naturally knew that the Sun Clan was sad. Because ever since Qin Huayuan went to defend the city, Cao Yuqing had always been by his side to protect him. How could the Sun Clan not be jealous? Qin Yining didn't want to comment on his father's private life, so he just smiled and said, "I understand. I'll be back soon. Go ahead. I know you two have a lot of secrets." Chapter 275. When Qin Yining and Ji Yun arrived in front of Ning Garden with an old oil paper umbrella, they saw Chi Tai, who was wearing a sapphire blue cotton robe and holding an oil paper umbrella. Seeing Qin Yining come out, Chi Tai quickly put down the umbrella and saluted. "Fourth Miss, quickly get up. Uncle An is an old man who has been with my father for many years. You must not salute me like this." Chi Tai's surname was An. But Chi Tai refused to listen. After saluting respectfully, he smiled and said, "Marquis ordered this lowly one to come and deliver a message to you. He said that he has something important to tell you. Marquis has been summoned by His Majesty to the palace to talk and is not free. I'm afraid that he will only be free at night. Therefore, he specially ordered this lowly one to come and tell you to wait at the foot of the mountain tonight. Marquis will come to see you." Qin Yining nodded and said with a smile, "I know. Did father say what it is? Why can't he take the time to come up the mountain? Old madam and everyone in the family miss father very much. He's really too busy. To tell you the truth, this lowly one has been following master around. These days, this lowly one has been so busy that my feet hit the back of my head." As Chi Tai spoke, he looked around. Seeing that there were no outsiders, he lowered his voice and said, "I'm afraid that His Majesty already has the intention to surrender. When it comes to such a big matter, it naturally involves many things. Marquis has been discussing with His Majesty all day long. Where would he find the time? Qin Yining nodded in understanding and sighed. It's really difficult for my father. I'll have to trouble uncle and to take care of my father and remind him to pay attention to his rest. Yes, this lowly one will naturally pay attention. How is my father's health recently? How is concubine Cao? Qin Yining was concerned about Qin Huayuan and Cao Yuqing again. Qi Tai said with a smile, although master is hungry and full in the army, at least it's better than outside. Concubine Cao has been disguising herself as a man and staying by master's side to protect him. The two of them are like friends. They don't talk much, but they have a tacit understanding. Qi Tai's words were telling Qin Yining in a roundabout way that Qin Huayuan and Cao Yuqing still had not done the deed of husband and wife. Qi Tai was someone who stayed by his father's side all day, so he naturally wouldn't be wrong. Qin Yining secretly sighed for his mother's sake and said with a smile, I know. Thank you. I will wait at the foot of the mountain tonight. All right, then this lowly one will take his leave. I still have to return to the Marquis side to listen to his orders. Qin Yining watched Qin's back then. It seems that His Majesty has decided to surrenders. And Yining then? Yun said. Ji Yun said, although I shouldn't say this, after this servant heard that His Majesty has decided to surrender, this servant's heart was really relieved. Qin Yining said with understanding, I understand. Let's not talk about anything else. At the very least, once the war is over, there will be no need to besiege the city. We will also have a way to survive. As for the country's interests, it's not something you and I can consider. That's right. Moreover, once the war is over, Wang Yi will definitely come to look for Miss has suffered so much during this period of time. Wang Yi must be very distressed. Ji Yun thought about how much importance Pang Xiao attached to Qin Yining. Now, she could only imagine when the two of them met in the future. As a bystander, she felt that the scene of their reunion would definitely be very moving. Qin Yining touched his burning ears. Although his expression didn't change, his heart was inexplicably excited. Although this kind of excitement shouldn't come when the Dayan imperial court was about to be destroyed. However, Qin Yining felt that the country's foundation had already been hollowed out by the Emperor Emeritus's torment during his reign. Even if he didn't want to admit it, Qin Yining also knew that this kind of imperial court wouldn't last for long. Now that he knew that the Yuqi Yang had the intention to surrender, Qin Yining felt a burst of light in his heart. When the two of them entered Ningyuan, they saw that the Sun Clan had been waiting for them for a long time. Qin Yining went to the Sun Clan to tell them about Qin Yining's intentions. Then, he emphasized the situation of Qin Huayuan and Cao Yuqing when they were defending the city. The Sun Clan's eyebrows relaxed when they heard this. Their worried hearts were also at ease. The irritation from the recent days of hunger also disappeared without a trace. They beamed with joy and asked, Sister Yi, you can't swindle people. How could I swindle you? This is what Qin Yining said just now. He follows father around all day, so he must know more than us. Unless Qin Yining is lying to me, I guarantee that there is nothing going on between father and concubine Cao. The Sun Clan's face was a little red. She felt a little embarrassed when her daughter saw how jealous she was. She coughed and said, Little girl, what are you saying? Is your mother the kind of person who is easily jealous? Of course not. I'm just worried for nothing. Qin Yining stuck out her tongue. The Sun Clan couldn't help but laugh. Although the people in the courtyard were starving, they were in a good mood after hearing the Sun Clan's and Qin Yining's happy laughter. Their irritation and fear also settled down on such a rainy day. Qin Yining spent the day as usual. When it was evening, he brought Ji Yun and Bing Tang out of Ningyuan. As soon as he stepped out, he saw Mu Jinghu, who was as thin as a stick and dressed in a light blue robe, standing with his hands behind his back. Are you going out? Mu Jinghu's delicate features were sharper because of his thinness. His eyes were very clear. Qin Yining nodded and smiled. My father is looking for me. Then I'll follow you in the dark. Qin Yining said guiltily, if young Master Mu is tired, you can rest on the mountain. During this period of time, no one has enough to eat. No matter how high young Master Mu's cultivation is, you're still a mortal. If you don't eat, you'll starve. If you don't eat, where do you get the strength? I'm really guilty. This time, I'm just going down the mountain to talk to my father. You don't have to follow me. Mu Jinghu frowned and thought for a moment. That's not good. I promised Fox to protect you. Don't worry, I know what I'm doing. Besides, I eat better than you. You're a little girl and you're fine. I'm a martial artist who cultivates both internal and external energy. How can I be weaker than you? Or are you worried that I'll eavesdrop if I follow you? Then I'll hide in the dark. If you don't want me to come out, I won't come out. Is that okay? Young Master Mu, what are you saying? Why would I be worried about eavesdropping? I'm just worried that you'll be tired. Forget it. Since that's the case, young Master Mu can hide in the dark. If there's anything, you can also secretly listen to my signal. Okay. Mu Jinghu nodded and smiled. Then you guys can go. Qin Yining knew that Mu Jinghu would naturally have his own way to keep up with him. Thus, he held hands with Bing Tang and Ji Yun and walked down Mount Qingchun along the winding path while carrying a lantern. When they reached the foot of the mountain, they saw a horse carriage parked on the road not far away. The wind lantern on the horse carriage swayed in the night wind. The air was filled with the moist fragrance of grass after the rain, making Qin Yining feel better. The three of them walked quickly towards the horse carriage. The people standing in front of the horse carriage also came forward to welcome them. Chapter 276. Greetings to fourth young mistress. The person who walked over with a lamp in his hand was Chi Tai. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Is my father in the carriage? Bring me there quickly." Chi Tai smiled and said, replying to young mistress, when this little one received the order to come out, the Marquis had not yet left the palace. The Marquis asked this little one to bring young mistress to the residence that the Emperor had bestowed upon the Marquis. Based on our journey, the Marquis would be almost there. The Marquis had also prepared some dry rations for you. They are mixed flour pancakes from the army. He said that you should bring them to old madam and the rest when you return. Qin Yining was a little hesitant, but he still nodded. All right, then let's set off quickly. Firstly, Chi Tai was her father's follower for more than 20 years. He was trustworthy. Secondly, she had Ji Yun and Bing Tang by her side. Mu Jinghu was also secretly following her. There was no need to be afraid of any trouble. Qin Yining, Ji Yun, and Bing Tang boarded the carriage. Chi Tai naturally sat outside the carriage with the coachman. The wind lantern swayed in the night. The carriage drove from the bumpy road to the flat and spacious road, heading all the way to the outer city. Now that the city was in chaos, the curfew was completely in vain. There was no one patrolling the city, and only the inner city gate was guarded. However, when they flashed the Qin Huayuan sign, these people respectfully let them pass. The road to the outer city was much more difficult to travel than the inner city. This was because there were many refugees who had fled from the disaster in the outer city. The starving commoners were bitten by mosquitoes, and their faces were numb as they huddled in the temporary shelters. They stared blankly as the carriage drove past them. Qin Yining looked at the scene outside the window and felt a wave of pain in his heart. He even began to pray that the emperor would surrender quickly. The faster he surrendered, the sooner the commoners' suffering would end. After a while, the carriage finally arrived in front of a courtyard. Qin Yining helped Ji Yun and Bing Tang out of the carriage and entered a black door. This was a small courtyard. The east and west wing of the courtyard were all dark, only the main room was lit. Hearing the sound of footsteps, a thin and delicate woman came out to greet them. Chi Tai smiled and said, "This is Sister Zhong. She is responsible for cooking for Marquis, and other people guarding the city." Qin Yining smiled and nodded at Mrs. Zhong. Aunt Zhong hurriedly bowed. After getting up, she said to Chi Tai cautiously, "The noodles you ordered are ready. Then bring it over first and let fourth young miss have some first. When the Marquis returns, I will cook for the Marquis again." In this day and age, eating porridge was already good enough. To be able to eat a bowl of noodles was truly a luxury. Qin Yining smiled. He thought that his father must have called him out to talk to him so that he could eat his fill. The group of people entered the main room, and Mrs. Zhong retreated. Qin Yining looked around the tidy and monotonous small room, then sat down on the stool beside the square table. He smiled and said, "My father has been living here for the past few days. Why isn't he in the barracks?" Chi Tai smiled and said, "Sometimes he is in the barracks. However, ever since Marquis Angua was lured out by Daju and lost 20,000 people in one go, even Marquis Angua himself almost lost his life, Marquis Angua began to avoid fighting. Originally, we had barracks stationed outside the city gates to prevent Daju's people from directly attacking the city. However, Marquis Angua did not allow it, so we dismantled the barracks. In any case, the city gates are closed, so there is no need for the Marquis to live in a tent." "I see. It has been hard on father. In the summer, there are so many mosquitoes and it is very hot. Living in a tent will definitely not be comfortable. It is more reassuring to live in a house." At this time, Mrs. Zhong came in with a large square plate. There were 3 steaming bowls of scallion and egg noodle soup on the square plate. On a slightly cold autumn night after the rain, the 3 bowls of noodles with egg and green scallion floating in the air exuded a burst of white steam and a tempting aroma. Qin Yining could not help but have a stomachache. Recently, she had been hungry often and always ate all kinds of wild vegetables. It was hard to guarantee that it would not hurt her stomach. Now that she saw this bowl of noodles, although she had a good appetite, her stomach was singing a different tune. Chi Tai smiled and placed the noodles in front of Qin Yining. He said respectfully, "Miss, please eat first. This was specially ordered by the Marquis. It was not easy to get these ingredients. The Marquis said to let you nourish your body." Then, Chi Tai smiled and said to Bing Tang and Ji Yun, "The Marquis said that the 2 of you have done a good deed by serving the 4th miss. Each of you should eat a bowl of noodles." Bing Tang and Ji Yun smiled and thanked him. They took the noodles and placed it on the table at the side. Naturally, they could not eat at the same table as Qin Yining. Qin Yining picked up the bamboo chopsticks. Just as she picked up the noodles with her chopsticks, Bing Tang suddenly pinched her arm. Qin Yining looked at Bing Tang in confusion. Bing Tang looked at the noodles and shook his head. His clear eyes looked at Chi Tai, who was standing at the side with his hands hanging down. He smiled mockingly and said, "Was this bowl of noodles really specially prepared by the Marquis for our miss?" Chi Tai was stunned and his expression was a little unnatural. Yes, if it was not for the Marquis, this lowly one would not be able to get these noodles for Miss to eat. That's because the person who cooked the noodles was careless and accidentally put the knockout drug into the noodle soup. Our Miss only needs to eat 1 mouthful of these noodles and it is enough to make her unconscious for 3 days. Ji Yun heard this and angrily rebuked, "What are you doing?" Mu Jinghu, who was guarding the side room, was so angry that he wanted to rush in. What a wastrel! In a year of famine, it was already good enough to have a biscuit to eat. It was rare to see steaming hot noodles, but someone actually recklessly put a drug in it. This was simply a waste of food. A waste of food. Qin Yining was still sitting on the bench with one hand behind his back. He waved his hand in Mu Jinghu's direction, indicating that he should not move. Mu Jinghu could only grit his teeth and bear with it and not come out. Qin Yining asked with a grave expression, "Chi Tai, did my father really ask you to bring me here today, or did you act on your own accord?" Chi Tai pursed his lips and suddenly revealed a mocking smile. "4th miss, I, Chi Tai, have let down the Marquis and you in this matter. But for the sake of the stability of this country, there is no harm in you sacrificing a little." As soon as he finished speaking, a furious Ji Yun kicked Chi Tai in the stomach. Chi Tai screamed in pain and retreated a few steps before falling to the ground. He hugged his stomach in pain and panted heavily. Ji Yun pulled Qin Yining with one hand and Bing Tang with the other. "Let's go." Qin Yining also knew that there was no time to lose and immediately followed Ji Yun out without hesitation. Who knew that just as they reached the courtyard, they heard the door in front of them being kicked open with a bang and a group of masked men barged in. Qin Yining stopped in his tracks and said with a grave expression, "Who are you?" At this moment, Mu Jinghu was already hiding in the shadows between the side room and the side room behind Qin Yining. Qin Yining also did not know where Mu Jinghu was. He still had his hands behind his back and waved, indicating that Mu Jinghu should not come out. Chapter 277. Qin Yining did not understand why the old servant who had accompanied her father for more than 20 years would suddenly have the intention to betray him. Qi Tai had just said that she should sacrifice herself for the sake of the country's stability, but now, it appeared in her mind. She really wanted to know what Qi Tai wanted to do. "Miss, let's go quickly." Ji Yun pulled Qin Yining with one hand and Bing Tang with the other. She quickly led them to the backyard. When the men saw that Qin Yining's servant girl was actually a martial artist, they were both shocked and angry. They hurriedly waved their fists and chased after them. As they chased after them, they did not forget to threaten them. If Qin Yining hadn't experienced this kind of thing before, she would probably have been scared stiff at this moment. However, Qin Yining was very experienced at such a young age. She had negotiated peace, been hunted down, and had almost been eaten by the Empress. Therefore, the more dangerous she was, the calmer she became. Those people did not carry swords and were all dressed in commoners' clothes. Although their faces were masked, it could not hide their southern accent. It was obvious that the people who wanted to kidnap her this time were Dayan people. She was most worried about her father's safety now, not herself. She had an expert by her side to protect her, so her life should not be in danger. She hoped that Cao Yuqing could do her best to protect her father. Qin Yining thought about many things in her mind, but it was only a breath's time outside. They turned into the alley and saw that there was indeed no one guarding the fence in the backyard. Ji Yun stepped forward and kicked open the gate. Qin Yining and Bing Tang hurriedly followed, and the three of them ran into a quiet alley. The 10 men behind them hurriedly chased after them. However, there were many forks in the alley, and it was convenient for Qin Yining and the other two to hide. Mu Jinghu took advantage of the fact that there was no one around to catch up with Qin Yining and asked, "Why don't you let me take action? This matter is very strange. Young Master Mu, just follow me in secret. As long as my life is not in danger, don't come out." Mu Jinghu looked at Qin Yining's bright eyes in the dark and could not help but think of a wild beast in the middle of a hunt. The hair on his back stood on end and he thought to himself that this person was indeed a fox. He said, "All right, I'll listen to you." With that, he turned around and disappeared into the shadows. At this moment, the sound of orderly footsteps and horse hooves suddenly came from outside the alley, mixed with the sound of armor rubbing against each other. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. He looked at Ji Yun and Bing Tang in disbelief. "It's the army. The only ones who can appear here must be our army." Bing Tang was dumbfounded. "Are you crazy? Why does our army want to capture us? Maybe they're here to capture those kidnappers." Ji Yun shielded Qin Yining and Bing Tang behind her. She leaned against the wall and quietly looked outside. What she saw caused her heart to tremble violently. The men who were chasing them just now were reporting something to the army officers who surrounded the alley. The two parties obviously knew each other. "Miss, this is bad. Those people are in cahoots. Then what should we do?" Bing Tang's voice was trembling. Qin Yining pursed his lips and thought quickly. Then, he said, "I have an idea, but I'll have to trouble Bing Tang." Bing Tang swallowed his saliva and nodded without hesitation. "Miss, please tell me. I'll listen to you." "Ji Yun, take my token now and think of a way to meet Wang Yi," Qin Yining said as he took off the red bean bracelet from his wrist. There was a new red plum bracelet on the bracelet. It was the same bracelet that was around Erbai's neck. Ji Yun took the bracelet and was puzzled. "Miss, do you want Wang Yi to come and rescue you?" "No, you don't have to say anything. You just have to tell him about the abnormal things that happened around me today. I feel that things aren't simple. They're not here just for me. Otherwise, why didn't these people kill me? Also, it's impossible that my father doesn't know about the mobilization of the army. There's an 80% chance that he's being held back by something. If you want to see my father and report the news, you might as well go and see Meng Shi. Besides, Qi Tai is my father's confidant. He should know about me very well. He knows better than anyone else that the only people related to me other than my family, is Pang Zhishi. Therefore, they want to kidnap me this time. Other than threatening my father, my family, or Pang Zhishi. No matter what, you have to tell Pang Zhishi to be mentally prepared. I don't understand. There's no time to explain. Hurry up and leave. Take this with you. He'll naturally trust you 100%. Tell him not to worry about my safety. I have young Master Mu secretly protecting me. My life won't be in danger. I'm here to see what the other party wants to do. You just have to ask Pang Zhishi to help pay attention to the safety of my father and my family. Okay. Since Miss says so, this servant will do as you say. Ji Yun knew that Mu Jinghu wasn't far from them. She also heard that Qin Yining seemed to have a complete plan. She carefully put away the bracelet and quickly left from the other side. Qin Yining held Bing Tang's hand and said, I'll have to trouble you. You have to share my joys and sorrows. If I knew that things would turn out like this today, I wouldn't have brought you out. Bing Tang shook her head. Although she was very nervous, she still held Qin Yining's hand and shook it. This is nothing. Qin Yining held Bing Tang's hand and hid in a crouch. There were 500 Dayan soldiers outside the alley. They searched every alley and gradually narrowed the encirclement. After hiding for the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, Qin Yining and Bing Tang hid behind a pile of firewood. Just as they stretched their necks to look outside, they suddenly felt something heavy hit their necks. Under the intense pain, their vision turned black and they lost consciousness. Qin Yining felt as if she had returned to the time when she was 7 years old. Her adoptive mother was seriously ill and she could only rely on the medicine she picked from the mountains. She didn't get better at all. She worked every day cutting firewood, but the copper coins she earned weren't enough to feed the two of them. When she went to the medicine store to buy on credit, the store refused. The shopkeeper ordered a 16 or 17-year-old shop assistant to grab her by the collar and throw her out of the store. She and her basket fell to the ground together, and the firewood and wild vegetables she picked up spilled all over the ground. She picked up the things and used her remaining copper coins to buy 2 meat buns. The buns smelled so good. She carried the buns all the way home and deeply inhaled the white and fat meat buns. The unique alkali fragrance of the white bun skin mixed with the faint fragrance of the meat and green onions made her salivate. The soup and oil seeped out of the filling of the bun and soaked the bun skin in 2 places. She carefully pinched a piece of bun skin the size of a fingernail and put it in her mouth. It smelled so good that it directly pierced into the depths of her memory. Her body trembled slightly. How did the bun disappear? Qin Yining woke up from her daze and heard the sound of wheels turning. She completely woke up and remembered what happened just now. She realized that she was in a carriage. She didn't immediately open her eyes. Chapter 278. Duke is truly quick-witted. In this way, Qin Meng's treacherous plan has been resolved. That's right. Originally, this old man was the first to surrender. Who knew that Qin Meng would steal the opportunity? Not only did he bring the proof of his allegiance to the emperor, but he also wanted to make a great contribution to Daeju. His benefiting from both sides. Don't tell me that all the benefits belong to him. His plan was good. Unfortunately, this old man found out about it first. The Zhou dynasty's secret emissary negotiated with this old man several times to get rid of Pang Zhishi. It seems that Pang Zhishi isn't doing well in Daeju. Duke is wise. That Pang Zhishi is too arrogant. His merit is too high, but he doesn't know how to tuck his tail between his legs. He can't blame others. However, Duke's wisdom is truly unparalleled. I truly admire it. This is just a small trick. First, he used this little bitch to lure Pang Zhishi here. After killing him, he will shift the blame to Qin Huayuan. This way, even if we surrender, Qin Huayuan will bear the crime of murdering Prince Zhongshuren. At that time, even if he has 100 mouths, he won't be able to clear his name. This is killing 2 birds with 1 stone. This old man won't have to deal with this group of people when I get to Daeju. At the same time, it will help the Empress get rid of this little bitch. Qin Yining closed her eyes. She heard the 2 people's words clearly. She was already shocked. She didn't expect Dukan, Li Mian, to be such a despicable person. Also, who was the secret emissary from Daju that Dukan mentioned? Who wanted to kill Pang Xiao? Qin Yining thought to herself. She continued to pretend to be unconscious, but she carefully closed her eyes. She found that the carriage she was in was extremely spacious. Bing Tang was like her. His hands were tied and he was lying at her feet. Dukan and a thin man were sitting with their backs to her. There seemed to be another person tied up in the corner of the carriage that was blocked by them. Qin Yining was just thinking this when she heard a whimper from the person in the corner. It was obvious that he had something to say. From the sound of it, it seemed to be Chi Tai. Dukan sneered, "TSK, I forgot about that. If he has something to say, let him say it." And Guogong's attendant went forward and pulled out the rag covering Chi Tai's mouth. Chi Tai took a few deep breaths and immediately asked, "Didn't you say that you wanted to use fourth mist to lure Pang Zhishi over and kill that evil fetus, so that the enemy would be in chaos and we wouldn't have to surrender? How dare you lie to me, Dukan, to think that you're the Duke's father-in-law? You've been thinking of surrendering for a long time. How can you face the Emperor? How can you be worthy of being a Dayan? You actually told me to trick the fourth young miss into coming out, and even wanted to kill my master. You are despicable and shameless. Ha! Don't make it sound like you're loyal." And Guogong sneered, "Your master only has one daughter. No matter what the reason is, you've betrayed him by tricking his precious one out. But I never wanted to harm the Marquis. I'm doing this for the greater good of the country, for the Dayan. Ignorant." And Guogong closed his eyes and waved his hand casually. "Who put this filthy thing on the carriage? It's quite heavy for the horse to pull it. Throw it down and take its head." "Yes." The carriage slowly stopped, and the guards outside came up to drag Chi Tai out. Chi Tai cursed in horror, "Li, you'll die a horrible death. You'll die a horrible death. This old man is also cleaning up the house for your Marquis. I didn't expect that a dog that I've raised for more than 20 years would bite him back. He's really useless." The curtain of the carriage slowly lowered, and Chi Tai's cursing stopped abruptly. The carriage resumed moving. Qin Yining closed her eyes, and her body couldn't help but tremble slightly. She tried to calm herself down and not let the other party find out that she had woken up. Once An Guogong found out that she was awake, he would suspect that she had heard a lot of their conversation. At that time, she would definitely be killed. The other party wanted to use her to lure Pang Xiao over. He might poison her, destroy her body, and let her die when he had enough. She believed that if a little girl like her could think of this, an old and cunning person like An Guogong would also think of it. She could not take this risk. But now she could be sure that her father was fine for now. Before An Guogong successfully tricked Pang Xiao to come and kill him, he would not reveal anything to her father. After all, her father had the reputation of Pan and the wise. Ordinary people didn't dare to let her father know when they played tricks. They were afraid that he would infer the truth. Qin Yining pretended to be unconscious, and her mind started to think of a countermeasure. Not long after, the carriage slowly stopped. Qin Yining seemed to hear the sound of flags fluttering in the wind, and the sound of messy footsteps and armor rubbing against each other. She didn't dare to open her eyes to look, but she guessed that she had arrived at the military camp. Someone lifted the curtain of the carriage and respectfully asked An Guogong to get off. Then someone entered the carriage and picked her up. Her nose was immediately filled with the sour smell of sweat from the unfamiliar man. The men in the military were not like them who relied on hot springs in the mountains. It was not easy to bathe in this kind of dry weather. Qin Yining endured the discomfort and continued to pretend to be unconscious. Then she heard An Guogong order, "Lock this girl up in a tent alone. She is still useful for now. You are not allowed to touch her." "Guogong, you mean?" Qin Yining heard the excited voices of the people around her. She felt many unfriendly gazes on her. If she hadn't forced herself to relax, the vigilance she had developed over the years would have made her tense up and run away. "These bastards, are they going to suffocate to death?" An Guogong scolded jokingly. A few men beside him laughed. It seemed that these people were the trusted aides of An Guogong. An Guogong probably wanted to use her and give her to these people. "Wake that little girl up. Tell her to go to the other side and send a message to Mr. Yoon. Tell him that if he doesn't come, I will give his beloved girl to the soldiers in the army. Send someone to keep an eye on that little girl. Don't let her play any tricks." Nguogong gradually walked away as he gave his orders. Someone brought some water and poured some ice sugar over him to wake him up. Bingtang's hands were tied, but her mouth was still free. As soon as she woke up and understood the situation, she immediately screamed, "What are you doing? Aren't you afraid that my Marquis will punish you if he finds out? If he wants to punish you, that will depend on the future. Right now, if you don't listen to us, we will kill you first." Someone told Bingtang what Nguogong had just said. Qin Yining, who was pretending to be unconscious, didn't know how Bingtang responded and what expression she had. Qin Yining felt the person holding her begin to walk. Then he took her into a tent and gently put her down. The man's rough fingers that smelled of sweat and smoke lingered on her cheek. Chapter 279. Qin Yining began to feel nervous. She could endure any kind of pain, but not humiliation. The unfamiliar man's rough fingers had a thick layer of calluses, and he smelled of sweat. Qin Yining almost wanted to vomit. She suddenly opened her eyes and glared fiercely at that person. That person was looking at her face with infatuation. He felt that he had never seen such a beautiful woman in his life. He thought that since she was unconscious, it wouldn't matter if he touched her a few times. Who would have thought that she would suddenly wake up? He was startled and took 2 steps back in a panic, almost falling down in his panic. Qin Yining saw this person's expression and felt slightly relieved. She said in a low voice, "What do you want to do? Don't you know who I am?" The man in his 20s coughed awkwardly. His ears were red, and he reluctantly looked at Qin Yining one more time before he fled. As soon as he left, there was a burst of laughter outside the tent. Several people joked and said that the man had been disliked by the beauty. Another person boasted that if he or she were to go, he or she would be able to take on 2 people. Once again, everyone mocked him. Qin Yining listened to those people's vulgar words and furrowed her brows in anger. She first looked around. This was a small military tent. She was sitting on a wooden camp bed facing the door of the tent. On the square table to her right, there was a pea-sized oil lamp. Next to the oil lamp was a crock with a clay bowl. It was probably used to hold water. On the left corner of the bed was a wash basin. Although Qin Yining's hands were tied, her feet were free. She got up and blew out the oil lamp. Once it was dark inside the tent, the shadows on the tent could be seen clearly. There were 5 people guarding her tent. The shadows of these 5 people were very tall, and should be less than 2 steps away from the tent. 2 of them were guarding the entrance of the tent, standing like a pole, while the other 3 were gathered on her right side, whispering to each other, and occasionally snickering. Qin Yining frowned. She thought that Duke Angwa's words had given these people hope. They thought that once they had used her enough, Duke Angwa would give her to them. Qin Yining sneered. The matter could not be concluded until the very end, so he decided to let these people have some fun for the time being. Qin Yining lay down on his side and waited for the news from Bingtang. At dawn, the sound of footsteps could be heard from outside the tent. Qin Yining was originally extremely tired and sleepy, but when he heard the commotion, he quickly sat up. He saw the curtain of the tent open, and a man pushed in Bingtang, whose hands were tied behind his back, and scolded, "Behave yourself. Otherwise, I'll kill you." Bingtang spat fiercely at that person before slowly walking towards Qin Yining. Qin Yining was relieved to see her come back safe and sound. The 2 of them sat side by side on the wooden bed. Bingtang looked at the door of the tent. When he saw that no one was coming, he whispered into Qin Yining's ear, "Miss, I saw Wang Yi." Qin Yining nodded and whispered back, "Did you go directly to Daeju's military camp? How is Ji Yun?" "I went to the military camp. Ji Yun had already arrived. Wang Yi is doing well, and his injuries have also healed. Wang Yi said that you don't have to be afraid. He has a way to resolve this matter, and he told you to stay here with peace of mind for the time being. He will be able to get them to release you in less than a day." "That's good." Qin Yining heaved a sigh of relief and whispered, What did you say to Duke Angua? Didn't Duke Angua arrange for someone to follow you? Bing Tang whispered, that person followed me to the Zhou dynasty's military camp and was captured by Wang Yi. I forced him to eat a poison pill. Only I have the antidote. He didn't expect Wang Yi to suddenly attack. After he was poisoned, he naturally listened to my orders. Qin Yining nodded. Fortunately, you know how to use poison. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to protect yourself. That's right. Bing Tang deeply agreed. If she didn't know how to use poison, this matter wouldn't have gone so smoothly. Since Pang Xiao told Qin Yining to wait in peace, she was completely relieved. With Pang Xiao's strategy and scheming, it shouldn't be difficult to resolve this matter. You're tired. Sleep for a while. Qin Yining whispered into Bing Tang's ear. Bing Tang was indeed tired. He laid on the inside of the wooden bed. Let's take turns to rest. I'll get up and take over for you later. No need. I rested well last night. You sleep. Bing Tang nodded. He closed his eyes and quickly fell asleep. Just like that, Qin Yining and Bing Tang peacefully stayed in the tent and took turns to rest. During this time, the person who was drugged by Bing Tang even came to deliver food. Although they were just mixed flour pancakes and salted vegetables that could kill people to eat in the army, they were still food that was hard to come by even with 1,000 gold coins. Qin Yining and Bing Tang shared a pancake and rested enough. They lay on the wooden bed and chatted in low voices. They were even more relaxed than when they were in Ning Garden. That afternoon, there was suddenly a commotion outside the tent. Qin Yining and Bing Tang looked at each other. They both sat up and listened carefully. They seemed to hear 3 cheers. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. The Yuqi Yang came. He didn't know if it was a blessing or a curse for them to come at this time. As soon as Qin Yining got out of bed, the tent's curtains were lifted from the outside. Through the tent's door, Qin Yining saw Angua Gong and several soldiers from the army. They were pale and sweating profusely as they led the Yuqi Yang, who was wearing a bright yellow dragon robe, into the tent. Qin Yining could finally relax. Since they dared to do this openly, the Yuqi Yang, as the emperor, would not be accused of murdering an official's daughter. Her safety could be guaranteed. He didn't know what method Pang Xiao used to make the Yuqi Yang personally come. Greetings, Your Majesty. Qin Yining and Bing Tang knelt down and saluted. The Yuqi Yang strode into the tent. He stood at the door with his hands behind his back and looked at Qin Yining and Bing Tang kneeling in front of him. He didn't immediately ask them to get up. Qin Yining lowered his head. He felt that something was amiss. If it was the Yuqi Yang in the past, he would have asked her to get up first. Could it be that something had changed? Yuqi Yang gritted his teeth and squeezed out a sentence. Unrelated people, leave. No one is allowed to come within 10 feet of the tent. Yes. Angua Gong led the guards and soldiers, and even called for Bing Tang. Everyone retreated and stood at a distance. Yuqi Yang pursed his lips. After a while, he sneered, "What a good method. What a charm. Tell me, should I charge you with treason?" Kchem. Qin Yining heard this and suddenly raised his head. He looked straight into Yuqi Yang's eyes, which were filled with anger. Yuqi Yang clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles cracked. He gritted his teeth and said, "Speak. This subject's daughter has never colluded with the enemy. I don't know how to reply to Your Majesty." Qin Yining lowered his head again in a manner that was neither servile nor overbearing. Yuqi Yang laughed with a hoarse voice and said, "This is hilarious. Initially, I was thinking of beating them at their own game, taking the opportunity to eliminate the murderer, Meng Zhishi, before surrendering, and consider it as having avenged Great Yang Dynasty. However, that boorish man actually dared to threaten this one. Chapter 280. Qin Yining didn't understand the reason for the emperor's anger. She hesitated for a moment before picking up the letter. On the envelope were the words to the emperor of the Yang Dynasty. Every horizontal stroke of the character was slightly raised, and the structure of the frame was just right. It was extremely beautiful, and the strokes were as vigorous as dragons. It showed the confidence and arrogance of the person who wrote it. There was no need to ask to know that this was Pang Xiao's handwriting. Qin Yining opened the letter inside. As soon as she saw the contents of the letter, she almost laughed out loud. There were only 6 words on the letter: send the person back at sunset. Otherwise, we will attack the city at our own risk. The signature was an arrogant swan character, and it even used Prince Zhongshuren's seal and Pang Xiao's private seal. Although it was a letter, the content was very concise. The seals used were not vague at all. A large red seal and a small private seal almost covered the entire letter, especially the last sentence, at our own risk. It was arrogant to the bone. It also showed her disdain for the Yuqi Yang. It was no wonder that the Yuqi Yang was so angry. His face was almost swollen from the slap. If Pang Xiao attacked the city, how could the Yuqi Yang defend it? Anguo Gong had already brought all the generals and most of the civil officials to submit a letter of surrender. As long as Pang Xiao attacked the city gates would definitely be opened. At that time, the Yuqi Yang wouldn't even have a chance to surrender. Because of the current situation, Pang Xiao didn't care about his surrender at all. Whether the Yuqi Yang surrendered or not, it had no effect on whether Pang Xiao could destroy Dian. Qin Yining pursed her lips, put away the letter, and presented it with both hands. Yuqi Yang didn't want to take it and sneered, "Are you very proud?" "Proud? This subject's country is about to cease to exist. What is there to be proud of? On the other hand, Your Majesty, do you know what you are saying?" Since the Yuqi Yang refused to take the letter, Qin Yining simply put down his raised hand and placed the letter on the table beside him. "Your Majesty just said that you knew that this subject's daughter was kidnapped by Anguo Gong and used this subject's daughter to lure Prince Zhongshuren into a trap." Although Yuqi Yang was full of anger, he still felt a little guilty when he heard Qin Yining ask him such a question. After all, he had claimed that he was the one who liked her, but he had allowed her to be kidnapped and used as bait. Yuqi Yang did not answer. Qin Yining said, "Does Your Majesty know what Anguo Gong's scheme is? He lured Prince Zhongshuren here so that after killing Prince Zhongshuren, he would bestow this subject's daughter to his personal guards and soldiers to play with, and then shift the blame of Prince Zhongshuren's death to my father." Yuqi Yang was shocked when he heard this. He slowly squatted down and looked at Qin Yining at the same level. Qin Yining knew that Yuqi Yang did not understand this, so he continued. "When this subject's daughter was kidnapped, she woke up as soon as she boarded the carriage. However, she pretended to be unconscious the entire time so that she could clearly hear the words of Anguo Gong and his aides. Anguo Gong had already contacted a secret envoy from Daeju. That person promised Anguo Gong that as long as he cooperated with Daeju's army, he could guarantee that all of the surrendered officials would be able to continue being officials after they went to Daeju. Anguo Gong said that my father had already suppressed him in the Dian court. If Prince Zhongshuren was killed by my father, then after we surrendered, all of the officials would go to Daeju. The emperor of the Zhou dynasty would definitely punish my father for his crimes. He planned to get rid of Prince Zhongshuren and my father's political enemies before he even set out. Your Majesty, are you aware of Anguo Gong's ingenious plan?" The last question pierced Yuqi Yang's heart. It was just like Pang Xiao's words, "You'll be responsible for the consequences." It shook his body and mind, causing him to fall to the ground. Ha, ha ha. Yuqi Yang sorrowfully raised his head, crying and laughing at the same time. "These are my subjects. They're not good at defending the city, but they're good at playing politics and scheming. They even included me in their plans. How laughable, how laughable. With so many subjects like this country's demise is not unjust. Me, the ruler of a fallen country, is not unjust. Ha ha." Qin Yining knelt on the ground and looked at Yuqi Yang, who was crying and laughing with his head hanging to the ground. He didn't care that his dragon robe was covered in dust. He also felt very uncomfortable. Who would be willing to go to this step? However, the Yang dynasty's chronic illness wasn't formed in a day or two. It had been corrupted by the Emperor Emeritus for decades. To be honest, even if Yuqi Yang was an emperor who worked hard to govern, the Yang dynasty would only be able to struggle at death's door for a while. Yuqi Yang really didn't have the talent in this area. He wanted to, but he was powerless. In the end, he had already done his best. "Your Majesty." Qin Yining sighed. He wanted to persuade him, but he didn't know how to do so. Yu Qi-yang sat in a daze for a while. Suddenly, he stood up with a grunt. He was a bit embarrassed, but he said very politely, "You can stand up." This time, I thought wrongly. After knowing what An Guogong did, I wanted to beat him at his own game. That's why I had Grand Tutor Qin stay in the palace to talk with me. At this point, Yu Qi-yang seemed to be afraid that Qin Yining would misunderstand. He quickly added, "Don't worry. Grand Tutor Qin and I have a teacher-student relationship. I won't harm him. I will definitely protect him. In the future, when I go to Daeju, I will have to trouble you to put in a few good words for me in front of Prince Zhongshuren." Qin Yining stood in a daze. He looked at Yu Qi-yang's fawning smile and didn't know how to react. In the end, he could only say, "Your Majesty is too polite. I won't forget that I am a citizen of the Yang dynasty. I also know that everything Your Majesty is doing is for the people of the capital, not for yourself." Yu Qi-yang almost cried when he heard this. Yu Qi-yang glanced at Qin Yining again. He patted the dust off his dragon robe and wiped his face. Then, he returned to his usual demeanor. He went outside and loudly ordered, "Someone, prepare the carriage." Not long after, someone rushed over with a cart pulled by a mule. There was no carriage on the cart, so it was obvious who was sitting on it. Yu Qi-yang ordered Bing Tang, who had already been untied, and said, "Take your young miss with you." Then, he ordered a young eunuch, "You, drive the carriage and send young Miss Qin to the other side." The young eunuch was so scared that he almost cried. He trembled and braced himself to accept the order. Qin Yining looked at Yu Qi-yang in shock. She didn't expect that Yu Qi-yang would directly send her to Pang Xiao's military camp. In the letter, Pang Xiao said that he was to send her back. What he meant was to send her back to her family Qin. He didn't ask him to do this. After thinking about it, Qin Yining understood. Yu Qi-yang was trying to curry favor with Pang Xiao. This was simply... She didn't know what to say. Qin Yining and Bing Tang sat on the cart. The young eunuch took the whip and drove the carriage out of the city with a bitter expression. They crossed a wide-open space and headed to Daeju's military camp on the other side. Yu Qi-yang watched as the city gates opened and closed. He watched as the cart went further and further away. His heart was filled with mixed feelings. The hatred in his eyes was finally replaced by helplessness. Then, he looked at An Guogong and the others who were standing on the side. Yu Qi-yang didn't know how to deal with them. The people in the military had rebelled. If he ordered An Guogong to be punished now, he might even lose his life. Forget it. Forget it. He had to survive first. Yu Qi-yang could only return to the palace with the eunuch. In the Tiger Army's military camp, someone quickly reported to Pang Xiao, "Wang Yi, a mule cart is coming from the other side. There are 2 pretty girls sitting on it." You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.